Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting and happy edition of the Jim Cornette Experience. Today, folks, we're going to try to find the happy side of the ring. We're going to make fun of the stupid side of the ring, and we're going to talk to the creators of Dark Side of the Ring, Evan Husty and Jason Eisner, about this week's season premiere and season 3 episodes and more. And to join me, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you, the proprietor of the new home delivery service, French Toast Fast by Last. When you want French toast, turn to us last. It's the great Brian Last, everybody.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again for the honest side of the ring, where I tell you the truth about all this bullshit in the world of professional wrestling. And I would never do that. My establishment, you must come to the establishment. No delivery.
Come to the Casbah.
The chateau has no delivery.
The honest, I like that, the honest side. Honest Brian Last. I would buy a used car from you because I've seen the way you drive and treat your cars.
That's not true.
Oh, for heaven's sake, you're like a madman down the streets.
If people could only see you in a passenger seat driving through Manhattan traffic.
You like where I put the brakes on, even though I'm on the passenger side with my imaginary brakes, but I'm really pushing it down to the floor and the car's not stopping. My mother used to do that. Mama Cornette didn't like to ride with other people either. She always liked to be behind the wheel. Because if she did ever ride with me, she would do the brake thing, just like I do.
I remember that you didn't like when I started yelling at some cab driver for cutting into my lane. You thought he may have a gun or something.
Mama, don't fucking, incense this guy. My God, look at his fucking, what he's driving. He doesn't give a shit about that thing. He'll just plow into us. That's why I can't understand people in the city of New York, Philadelphia, Boston, whatever, Los Angeles, with expensive cars. That's just like taking a Fabergé egg and just fucking letting some kids on the playground play soccer with it. On those fucking roads, you mad people up there. Insanity! Stop the insanity! How long can we go today without talking about any modern wrestling? That's what I want to know. We're going to see how long we can.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you bring that up because I did want to say that, this is a season with a lot of things happening, and it appears to me, now I don't have much of a green thumb, but everything's a lot more green right now this year than it was last year, Jim. In fact, I think this is kind of where things were the second week of May last year.
You're trying to get me in a good mood for the program so I don't get sour and just rant and vent on everybody and get us kicked off of the air. Yes, it has been, as a matter of fact, a wonderful dogwood season this year. It didn't go from cold to hot, boom, just like that. Last year, actually, by the time that my dogwood was in full bloom on one side, it was starting to get green leaves on the other, which is a sign of a transition from cold to warmth too fast. But it's been beautiful this year. And you people are now getting the remnant. We've sent our leftovers up to you up there. But you're going to have a nice one, too, now that we're finished with it down here. Say thank you.
I'm looking forward to it. It's beautiful out right now.
But meanwhile, a couple of days ago here, it was raining like pouring piss out of a boot. It rained like a tall cow pissing on a flat rock. And I couldn't wait. You've never heard that before? No,
I've never heard that before. No, I have not.
These are all, well, the last one was a Mama Cornette, but these are all expressions that we use down here.
Wait, hold on. This is a Mama Cornette original? This is a Mama Cornette original.
Well, that's the first place I heard it, but I'm sure she didn't make it up. But
say it again.
Rated like a tall cow pissing on a flat rock. It's fucking coming to boom, just hitting the ground. What?
Do cows piss on rocks? I don't understand.
Well, see, no, if they piss in their own, like, poop or their own pen or the mud, then it doesn't really splash. But if they piss on a flat rock, and if you've ever seen a tall cow piss, then if it hits that flat rock, it's splattering everywhere. It's not just being nullified and being subdued by soft earth or pasture or hay or whatever, it's hitting that rock. It's going everywhere.
A tall cow.
Raining like a tall, because the farther up the piss comes from, the harder it's going to hit that flat rock. What's the matter with you, son?
I've never heard of any. How much bigger is a tall?
Physics?
How much bigger is a tall cow than your average size
Well, you
cow?
get an extra 6 to 9 inches of height on that stream of piss. You know, you could put somebody's eye out with that type of thing. But anyway, boy, you fucking Yankees. So I was waiting for this because, as you know, I've had the Monroe brothers doing a lot of work here over the last couple months since the weather has turned on the property. And I mean, and they've painted and they've raked and they've cleared fence rows and they've done a variety of things and wonderful. But the two main things that I wanted to get done both involved my drainage. And I've mentioned this, I think, before, and because they put a French drain in for me, because part of that was my back door to the castle. It opens out onto a stone walkway, but it's got retaining walls on both sides and a stone trim around the edge of the walkway. And if the drain gets clogged up, then it fills up like a fish pond, which is not good. It could back up into the back door eventually. Well, I knew the drain was clogged because it was not draining properly. So I had the Monroe brothers go down there, and where it was supposed to come out of the ground had been covered over by time, and it's a downhill. It runs about 70 feet underground. It comes out down the hill back of the house, and that was all clogged up. And also they dug about a 10 or 12 foot section out, and that was clogged up, and they got that dug out, and then joined that. They ran a hose down, it had some water coming out, so they joined that to this other about a 60-foot-long French drain that they dug in the middle of this natural little valley area where all the water pours down from a couple of directions anyway, and they just run it right off to the edge of my property and into the ladies next to me who's got a big old dry pond bed that all the water over many years has worn, and then it seeps from there into her creek. So I'm doing my part to let water go in its natural direction. Well, everything was working fine, except we haven't had a torrential rain, a big downpour, and I'm waiting to see how it's going to work and everything. And then the other day, on Wednesday, I believe, the torrential rain came. And that torrential rain, I think they said at the airport it was like a little over an inch in 20 minutes. So it's coming down like a tall cow pissing on a flat rock. And I look out at the brand new French drain, and it seems to be, because you can't tell, right, to look at it. And I'm not going to go out there in the rain, except I see the walkway, and the walkway's filling up. It's filling up fast. That fucking drain is still stopped up. And I'm going out, and now it's coming down, and it's backing up close to the door of the house. And I'm out in the rain. I've got a mop bucket, and I'm trying to bail this goddamn water. It's fucking ridiculous, right? But I'm making no progress. And then I see that apparently about a half inch before it gets to the door, it waterfalls over that trim on that walkway and starts washing down the. So I'm like, fuck. So basically, since I'm already wet, I go down the other end. The French drain that they put in is working perfectly. Water is gushing out the other end of it from all of the hills that converge in that area and just right over to the neighbor's property where I don't have to worry about it. But when I listen for the water where the French drain hooks up to the drain that they replaced, it's trickle, trickle, trickle. So apparently they have to dig up probably all of the other 50 feet that they haven't dug up and replace that whole drain because water is trickling through it, but not. It's like a clogged artery, Brian. I've got plaque. My drain should have been on cholesterol medication. So a little water goes through, but not a lot. So they're going to have to dig another 50 feet of this. But I'm thinking at least there may be a silver lining in this because I've also been waiting for the torrential rain to see Cornette Creek, because I've mentioned this way back on the property. Underneath the old oak tree, this oak tree is three grown men can't link hands and reach around this old white oak tree. And ever since I was a kid, there's been a spring down there, and there's been a little stream. My dogs used to drink out of it. There's some redbud trees down there. There's a nice sycamore growing there. It's surrounded by other trees on my property and across on the neighbors. And it's always been running ever since I've been alive. And I've always thought, I'm going to make a sitting area one of these days down here. So over the last couple of years, when they built that subdivision behind me and they did the construction and all the blasting, I'm thinking, well, I hope, because wherever this spring comes from, it's natural water. It never dries up. I hope they don't cut my water off some way. Well, apparently the opposite has happened, because a couple of summers ago, we noticed it was always wet down there. Well, the water was now coming up out of the ground about 15 feet up from where it always has. And since it hadn't done that before, it had not worn a trench. So it's just bubbling up out of the ground, and it's just spreading out over a whole area, in addition to where it's coming up out of the original spring. So what I had the Monroe brothers do, they dug that out and they trenched it along to where it met the other thing downstream. And then they've gotten about 3 tons of creek stone, and they have put rock arrangements around the oak tree and mulched it, and a nice rock ledge, and they have lined that stream and that creek there with all this creek stone and made it look nice and pretty. So the water has a couple of waterfalls and it cascades down, and it's about 50 feet long now. And they made a nice bowl at the head of it where the water comes up out of the ground, made out of stone ledges, so it looks like it's just, an old stone well. And a couple of patio little sitting areas, about 8 by 10 on one side of the bank and the other where it twists under the tree. And I'm like, well, this is just swell, right? So at least it's pouring rain. I'm going to go down there and see how this is working, because over next to it, we've just put a bunch of topsoil down, some dirt down, and we're going to plant some grass where that water was rushing across, going underneath the poplar tree, and just washed away all my shit. So I go down there, and the water is rushing. It's gushing. You can hear it when I walk up on it down this creek, boy, because it's coming. It's always a good little steady stream, but with this much rain, it's just flowing. And you can hear, and all of a sudden, I look where we put this soil down. I was ankle deep in this mud. I'm like, what the fuck? And there's a stream of water coming down beside the creek. The creek is full. It's not overflowing. It's doing what it's supposed to do, but there's another stream next to it. And I go all the way up to the head of the thing, and that water's pouring out of the little waterfall they've made and everything. It looks gorgeous, but meanwhile, Brian, guess what's happened? There was so much water, and wherever the fuck it's coming from underneath the ground, it started coming out in 2 or 3 different places uphill. And it's just, I'm like, what the fuck? And one place, we've already found this because we were looking at, there's a natural, dent where things these hills run together. And we found this little hole about 8 inches around that water will trickle out of a place about 12 feet up, and it'll run down and it'll drop in here, and you can't see the bottom of it. You can't flashlight it. And so now there's water pouring out of that like a garden hose, and it's pouring into that hole, and it sounds like an open manhole. I don't know how far so I have a cave underneath the ground because I don't know how far that fucking water was falling. And apparently I'm going to have them dig all or part of another stretch of 125 feet or so to direct all this newfound natural resources I've got down to Cornette Creek.
Well, that was the tale of Cornette Creek, soon to be immortalized in children's books.
Yeah. I'll tell the
Cornette
kids
Creek. Where'd you come up with that name?
Well, it was going to be a nice little area now, but we've got far to go apparently.
It sounds way too relaxing for you.
I'm trying to be relaxed. I'm always tense.
I'm down at Cornette Creek.
I'll tell you, I'm all right now. Last week. And I'll tell you why I'm tense, because the action figures. Let's bring that up. I mentioned that if you domestically in the United States have ordered a 2-pack of figures, that weekend they were on sale, your stuff is already in the mail. And I've started on the single figures. And the single figures are continuing to go out, but they will be all out by this coming Wednesday. And then I start on the figures with other items domestically, which will take probably another week or so. And then you find international customers with the world of patience. What will that be? By the middle of May, your stuff will start going out to destinations far flung across the globe. And there is no way on hell or earth that JimCornette.com, Cornette's Collectibles, will be reopening before June at this point, and the new website's being worked on, so there may be a big grand opening, and I'll stay open another week and then close down again. But I appreciate everybody's patience, and that stuff is flying out these days. You got your shot, and Stacy's got her first shot. Have we talked about this on the air?
I just got mine, so we haven't talked about it from me. I don't think we talked about Stacy's either.
Well, she just got hers. So we haven't talked about any of this. How are you feeling? Have you turned into a werewolf yet?
I feel good now, and I think I'm past the point where if there were any side effects, I'd really be feeling it. I got the single shot Janssen, Johnson & Johnson.
Janssen, Johnson & Johnson?
That's what was on the form, Janssen/Johnson & Johnson.
That's... It sounds like Hummadinga, and McCormick. But I'm glad you got the Jensen, Janssen & Johnson, and Olsen & Johnson.
Or maybe it's Jensine? I don't know. But I got the Johnson & Johnson single shot. My arm was a little sore for a couple of days. Felt a little out of it for a portion of a day, but I feel good now.
I'm all right now, but last week I was in rough shape.
When are you getting vaccinated?
Well, that's what I'm about to tell you. If you'll just let me, Matthew. No, Stacy gets this thing on her phone because she's got her health doctor thing on her phone, right? Okay, like obviously I do not have these things. So they offered to make her an appointment automatically through this thing. And she, okay. And I said, well, what about me? And she said, well, I don't know how to do. They gave me the invitation. They didn't invite you. You're not on the deal. And I said, well, then you get yours and let me know where it is, and we know and what the procedure is like, and find out how to get my appointment, which she did. And she's just basically been tired. She said it was not, she hadn't necessarily been sick or puny in any specific way, just kind of blah. But she goes back to get her second one in 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks now, or whatever the fuck. And at that point, now she knows how to make me an appointment through some email Zabada. So I'll just tag along for the ride and get my first one at that point. But here's the thing. I've seen the paperwork now. What did yours say? They're not making a lot of guarantees. Did you notice this?
What did what say? What papers?
They gave her paperwork on the vaccine, and that this has been issued for emergency use, but has not been FDA approved yet, and basically no promises. I'm not saying that the thing's harmful or that the thing isn't going to work as they say, but they can't actually come out and say because they don't know yet. Hey, and also it's not 100% effective to begin with. It's 92 or 96 or that single shot, maybe whatever it's worth. But also, they're not allowed to even come out and say this is actually authorized yet. So they had to give her paperwork. I don't know, maybe in some heathen state, you heathens up there in New Jersey, they just willy-nilly.
No, they gave me a card. They gave me a little card for my wallet that says, please keep this record card, which includes medical information about the vaccines you have received. And it has the information here.
Oh, no, I wish I had
CDC logo, and it says, bring this vaccination record to every vaccination or medical visit. And then,
I wish I had this paper. It's like 4 or 5 pages of what they couldn't promise or guarantee or whatever. And you should still, What I'm hearing is, yes, the vaccine, depending on which one you get, is X% effective, but nothing's 100%. And it'll prevent you from getting. This is what I don't understand about these knuckleheads. Like, oh, well, now let's drop all the mask shit. Now that most people are going to be vaccinated, you can still either get it, it just won't make you sick, hospitalized, or dead. And you can spread it even if you've been vaccinated. So why does in the world does anybody think that we ought to drop the fucking masks out in public amongst each other? That's what I can't figure. They're not guaranteeing anything. I'm like, motherfucker, I'm going to get the vaccines because not going to the hospital or dying sounds attractive to me. But I will continue to be as far away from other disease-carrying human beings and as covered up as possible when I am out in public for the foreseeable future until they start giving out guarantees and money-back opportunities and giving us documents that we can call Stephen P. New over if shit takes place. That's what I think.
I don't understand why people wouldn't want to wear the masks. You get a good, comfortable one that you can breathe with. I'd get through stores quicker now than ever before in my life. I just get right through because I look like a bandito. And everyone else does too. And it's wonderful. And I love it. You can see my eyes and that's it.
I've got the goddamn gloves on. I've still got my black latex gloves. I've got another 200 pairs of those I stocked up. And I got the mask, and I will wear long sleeves because I don't want people accidentally possibly touching my arms. And I go and I do what I have to do as quickly as possible and get the fuck out of there. And it's a wonderful way to not waste your fucking time because I've got figures to pack. But yeah, that's the thing is I don't understand why everybody's saying, well, we should just drop all the masks and all of our the precautions we've been taking because the vaccine now might probably keep you from getting too sick. Or death rates will be down. Well, mine's going to be fucking non-existent, motherfuckers. I'll be the last son of a bitch on the earth to catch this shit. I guarantee you that. Which comes up or brings up something else I'm astonished by. I've seen the pictures. And I'm not encouraging people not to go to fan fests and stuff if they want to go to fan fests. But I'm looking at pictures of people at fan fests or any public gatherings now, like I would look at the first pictures of the Martian people that were discovered in the colony on the moon. What the fuck? There is nobody on Earth that I want to see in person right now bad enough to go into a crowded room. Is there you?
No. Not really. I mean, I won't even go to a Met game. I'm waiting until next year to go to a Met game. You turn on that, and there's people in the stands wearing the mask, people without the mask. At least they require you're vaccinated and tested.
But see, I'm looking for people. I don't care whether they got a mask on or not. Unless they're fucking in one of those shrink wrap things, and they're completely airtight, sealed away from me. Fuck it. And that's what I'm starting to get emails from people who don't listen to the program and don't know me personally, say, Mr. Cornette. And I mean, I appreciate being invited and asked to do things, right? People still care, the people. But they're like, Mr. Cornette, can you quote us price and availability on coming to a fan fest or doing this or doing that? So they're not regular listeners. And I have had some of the cult members ask when I was going to peek my head out. I don't see a live appearance in my future. I don't want to lie and say ever, but for the next, here's the thing. I still want to do one thing in 2022 because of my OCD for milestones and round numbers. And if I do one show that year, I can knock off both a 40th anniversary and my 5th decade in the same night. But otherwise, I can't imagine what I'll be doing in person live anywhere for the next few years. I've got enough projects to keep me busy here that it's not like I'm going to get bored. But it just skeeves me out now. It's ruined it for me. It's like when when you get sick after you had that fucking Nestle's Quick and you're like, oh shit, chocolate milk for the rest of your life, whatever. I'm just like, I'm skeevy now. Around a bunch of people, my spidey sense starts tingling. I'm like, what the fuck?
Didn't that actually happen to you with the Nestle Quick?
Yes, that's why I used it as a goddamn simile or an analogy or a for instance, as Aunt Lola would say. Anyway, yeah, fuck Nestle's Quick. How about that? I bet I'm the only person that said that on a podcast this week.
I did hear from someone who recently was in attendance at a convention somewhere in Georgia. I don't know where. But this person did tell me not a lot of masks.
And I don't know who I'm more stunned at, the fans or the boys. Because it's like, I can't, we were doing the photo ops, put your arms around people, hey, shaking hands, blah, blah, blah. And I would be out of my fucking skin if I was put in that position right now. I would be too confining and have to go somewhere. Like when I would have to get out of the car in fucking Manhattan traffic. Anyway, but we're still here to serve the people in an oral way. AURAL, oral way. We're giving you oral pleasure. That's the one thing you can count on from Brian Last and Jim Cornette. They will give you oral pleasure anytime you want it.
Eargasms
for the fine folks out there. I just got to bring this up, and also he's one of yours up there, one of those fine New Yorkers. Giuliani got raided by the feds. Fucking Nosferatu had to turn over his cell phone, laptop, and other evidence that he is indeed a black-hearted prince of darkness. Are you excited about this, Brian?
This is going to be great. Most New Yorkers can't stand Giuliani, and everyone always, from around the country, will point to 9/11 because that's really primarily where they know Giuliani. And what a lot of people miss is how hated he was on 9/10. He was not a very popular mayor, especially at the end there. And to see this happen because of his own behavior and his own conduct, and it's not a surprise, after everything we've seen for the last 5 years or so, nothing with him is a surprise. And the fact that he's now being looked at by the same office he once led, which had a reputation. If you knew anyone who got into any trouble, whether organized crime or anything else, with that office when Giuliani was there, they messed with people. They tried to intimidate people. They were a tough office in the name of the greater good, but they were a tough prosecutor's office, and now they're the ones going after him. It's pretty amazing.
Well, here's the question is, we know that he was often unpopular there, but was he always as crazy as a rainbow trout in a car wash? Was he always melting? Did he always look like he just, fucking Renfield had just snatched away the last spider?
He was always...
Or has he gotten more and more fucking weird?
He's gotten more and more weird since 2001, 2002. But even when he was in New York, he had a reputation as being someone who was constantly in need of attention. I think Jimmy Breslin. You know who Jimmy Breslin is, right?
Yes, the columnist.
The famous columnist. I think he's the one who said about Giuliani, he's a small man always looking for a balcony. And I always thought that's such a great line about him.
Or as Dennis Condrey would say, he's a glory hound.
Yeah.
But here's the question, though. He's known, because if we knew it, then he knows it. They announced he was under investigation some time back. And the only reason he hadn't been under investigation any further, according to the reports, or any further back, is because obviously when Trump was in office, they were blocking the Justice Department from investigating it. Now that Trump's not in office, they're not blocking it. So they're investigating him. Would he be stupid enough if they just got his phone and his laptop and whatever? Would even a assistant depraved lunatic such as Giuliani be stupid enough to still have smoking guns on his shit? Or wouldn't he have Or is he smart enough to get rid of that stuff? Or can you get rid of all the things they could find?
I can't speak to whether or not you can get rid of everything Giuliani would have, but remember, in terms of smart enough, I believe he took a phone call from a fake Ivanka Trump, excuse me. He butt dialed several reporters who got to listen in on his conversations.
And he booked a press conference at Four Seasons Landscape.
He did that. So. The goop that dripped off him, he got caught. Whatever he was doing in his pants with Borat's daughter. I mean, it's not like just all of a sudden like, oh my God, Giuliani, I disagree with so many of his views, but that's a man of respect. I can't believe this. No, this is like the logical end of the Giuliani experiment.
Okay, maybe Rudy is, maybe we shouldn't be laughing. We shouldn't be mocking. Maybe it's a serious medical issue. Maybe he's got a little senility going, a little Alzheimer's, because he's not as old as Joe Biden, and wasn't Joe supposed to be senile? Wasn't there, old sleepy Joe, old senile Joe, doesn't know his way around the house? How's that turned out for everybody? These idiots. He's the smartest guy in the room again. He gave a speech the other night that if we've said this about Barack Obama on a regular basis. If these Neanderthal, backwards ass, knuckle dragging, mouth breathing morons that just can't listen to facts and reason would listen to this human being speak and not, whether he was a Democrat or Republican or whatever, just listen to Joe Biden, you couldn't disagree with anything he said. He said it in a reasonable manner. He addressed what actually needs to be done. I've seen some of the news report the news interview he did with the Today Show. He not only gives you detail, he gives you too much detail. He knows who's running everything, who's in charge of everything, the facts or the background on different things. He has stepped up and he is keeping track of this shit. They're exceeding all their goals, whether it be for the vaccine or passing the COVID relief or hopefully everything else that he's doing over the next 2 or 3 months that they've announced. So you just have to want to, especially in contrast with the lunatic criminal that we just got through with that couldn't finish a coherent sentence and didn't know shit about anything and wasn't really good at lying to cover it up. Biden sounds like fucking Albert Einstein, a rational human being that's in charge of the situation and is making valid decisions. So is it just that they have to try that hard to not listen to anything the guy says? Because now Trump had 4 out of 10 people's approval. Biden now has 6 out of 10. The 4 out of 10 can't, if they believe in him, if Jesus Christ came up there and said, "What's the matter with you people? Trump was an idiot and the Democrats are in charge now," they'd get mad at Jesus Christ. And they believe in him. What goes through their minds that they think that Joe Biden is senile or that not in any way a rational, sane, competent human being in charge, and why can't that they can't see the contrast in what we've just had to put up with for 4 years? What is wrong with their minds?
I'm not in a position to diagnose them.
Are you? Now, come on now.
What do you want me to say here?
Schweitzer, you've got it like Dutch Mantel. He had a pre-law background, a pre-med background. You've got a pre-psychiatric background. I know that you've consulted with at least 7 or 8 pre-psychiatrists. Try to tell me what's wrong with these fucking people.
I think it's a lot of just tribalism. You pick your side now, and this is your sport. It's like you're on the Giants. You're on the 49ers. You pick this side, and now you're going to fight for every single point you can get. And you don't give up no matter what. I think that's what it is. I think for a lot of people in Washington and out of Washington, politics is just their version of sports. And they're really passionate about their team. And they're willing to look the other way on a lot of shit.
Look the other way on a lot of shit. Let's get something more positive. We need to do something, a shout out to some more Cult of Cornette members. This is from Dan. And he just says, "Hey, Corny, listening to the experience this week inspired me to write to you. Me and my girlfriend also lost a pet suddenly and unexpectedly this week. Our kitty Cyrus was amazing and can only be described as a furry football. My girlfriend is a postal employee. I love you guys. USPS keeps Cornette's collectibles in business. I went back and started re-listening to the first drive-thrus to block out the depression. I'd just like to thank you, Jim, because your sultry tones have kept me sane. Obligatory kitty pictures have been added." And Cyrus was indeed a furry football. So sorry to you guys, Dan and your girlfriend.
Yeah, and if you went back to the beginning of the drive-thru, that sultry voice may not belong to Jim Cornette.
No, he was talking about my sultry voice. He was trying to be not the other sultry voice. I think you might put the L in earlier, take out an R. Nevertheless. And also, we have an email update. What are you doing? Doing spell check in your head there, Brian? We have an update from a previous discussion here on one of the programs. Apparently, old Mark Carano had gotten released a couple weeks ago, future endeavored from talent relations in the WWE, and I had mentioned, so wow, he sucked up to me, but he was the guy that sent Mickey James her shit in a garbage bag and blah, blah, blah. And then we read an email from an unnamed WWE employee who would know. I think that's the way that we described him, who was uncomplimentary toward Mr. Carano. And gave me one of the opposing viewpoints of him than what I had. And we have another brief, and we're going to describe this as WWE employee who would know. And that'll be the end of it. And just a summary. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just the highlights that I underlined about Mark Carano. Liar, ass kisser, but only if you can make him look good. Swindler, car salesman, piece of shit. Fuck him. So there you have some thoughts on. Apparently, this guy made a lot of friends. Have you heard anybody coming out and saying, "Oh, this fucking guy was a great guy. He was my best friend"? I've never had so much joy going to work as when I'd run into Mark Carano's smiling face.
You know, I just pulled up a text message I got on Monday, on Sunday, from someone who used to work in WWE, not a wrestler, someone who worked in the office.
WWE employee who would know.
Correct. I guess just say employee, and you figure out it's not a wrestler. So an employee of WWE.
See, I don't even pare it down like that, because I would not. If I would say, I would group wrestlers and anybody who worked for the WWE as WWE employee who would know. That way, everybody's on the same ground. Nobody gets fingered.
Well, this person texted me, "I believe any accusation made against Carano." And I said, "It seems like a lot of people disliked him." And the response I got from just a nice guy is, "Snake. I never had problems with him. He was a marketing research coordinator back then, but you could tell you couldn't trust him." So there it is.
Wow.
Apparently a snake to many people in that tower.
Well, you know, he who made kittens put snakes in the grass.
I did not know that. I guess I did know that. I did know that. I just didn't know the expression. I'd never heard that before.
No, come on.
It's not a Mama Cornette original?
You, Mr. Music. You, Mr. Sony. You, Mr. Pop Culture. You, Mr. fucking music business insider. He who made kittens put snakes in the grass. Where did that come from?
I don't know the lyric. What song?
Jethro Tull, Bungle in the Jungle.
Oh, that's why I don't know the lyric.
Come on now. Jethro Tull's a very underrated band.
Yeah, Aqualung and Bungle in the Jungle is the other song that gets any play. That's why I didn't know the lyrics. It's the most ridiculous song. What is that song about? Is it about playing in the zoo? What is that song about?
It's Jethro Tull. You don't really know, do you? But I stole that for a fucking promo for Yokozuna with Bret Hart. Just remember, Bret, he who made kittens put snakes in the grass. It was a cage match. It was a whole big built-up deal, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you don't like Jethro Tull.
That line would have worked better coming from Fuji. It would have sounded like wisdom.
It would have sounded like Oriental wisdom instead of a fucking one-eyed flautist or whatever. Well, speaking of I don't know how to transition this. He's got two eyes, and unless he plays the skin flute, I don't know if he's a flautist, but apparently Ryback is doing his pole over. We've talked about this a couple of weeks ago, ladies and gentlemen, on the program. Ryback put out a poll on his Twitter of his Twitter followers of where they would like to see his career go next. And I think the choices were AEW, NXT, maybe there was one other one, and retire. And when we noticed the poll, retire was leading with 40% of the vote. And by the time we got finished talking about it and our show came out, retire was running away with it with 70-something% of the vote. And now apparently Ryback is he claiming victimization of the people were fucking with him? It was a Baba Booey on his poll. They couldn't really want him to retire. Serious votes only this time type of thing. He's redoing the poll.
Yeah, I'm starting to think maybe this is a new gimmick he came up with, because I saw something earlier. I'm trying to find it now, but the other one I see here is due to fraudulent votes from the last poll, we have to redo where do you want to see Ryback return? It can greatly impact my future, so don't vote retire. See, that's what makes me think it's a gimmick, is when I see that. Don't you dare vote retire.
How can it be? Yeah, don't say USA. Don't say USA. How can a poll on his own that he put up on his own Twitter greatly affect the future of his career? But I wish it could, because at 70-something% retire, that's pretty decisive. Is a major sponsor looking at this poll to determine whether or not they should engage Mr. Fatback? Or what? How is this going to impact which career also? Because, well, I mean, I get he's doing shows, podcasts, or things, or such, or whatever, and he has something to do with nutrition. But he's implying that he has a wrestling career. When's the last time he wrestled?
I can't tell you. I have no memory.
I had crickets. Wait a minute. Do I have anything approaching crickets? Maybe. Yeah, that's about as close as I can get to crickets. So I don't know what is he supposed to retire from? Hasn't that retirement already been requested of him by, as they used to say in the opening of The Odd Couple? Felix Unger was requested to leave his home. That request came from his wife. Maybe the fans and the promoters have already spoken and he didn't need to put the poll up. Maybe that's what he'll be doing soon, is putting polls up for the telephone company. Well, there you go, Ryback.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's back. 10 pounds heavier. 3 old Memphis wrestling fans will like that line. So speaking of old Tennessee wrestling fans, Smoky Mountain Wrestling got more publicity last week on network television than it has since we were on the air. With the WWE Treasures show. I watched the Piper biography. We talked about that on the drive-thru, but 11 o'clock is too late for me these days. So I had to catch up with that on the DVR. But did you get to watch it, or did you ever find it? You were lost.
No. Well, they air one after the other, and I didn't DVR either of them last week. So I haven't seen the Piper biography or Hidden Treasures.
Well, they're repeating them
Treasures
constantly.
Are they?
Yes.
I went through the DVR and it was all bunch. I mean, not DVR, the TV guide on the remote. And there was a bunch of other crap. I didn't see any.
You sound like me now. I went through the thing on the Well, every time they especially they rerun the previous week's editions on Sundays before they run the new editions.
Okay, so I'll get it this weekend.
Them on other days as well. You're just not looking in the right place. Anyway, there was a bunch of well, obviously they interviewed Taker and Kane, Glenn, but even to hear Stephanie McMahon say Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But they've used footage of their first match in Knoxville at the Super Bowl 95, which was in August. But the premise of for the WWE Treasures program was that they were going to find the original Unabom outfit that he wore, because Kane at that time, Glenn was Unabom. So the original Unabom outfit that he wore in that match that they had the tape of and etc. And of course, Glenn, I don't know where he learned at an early age to save his wrestling memorabilia and documents and things and such. Where could he have been in an atmosphere where that would have been taught? But anyway, he had it in his garage, or not his, actually looks like a storage apartment area over his garage. But he had all his stuff, and when he brought it out, I hadn't seen that thing in person in 25 years, but it gave me a chuckle when he said, this is not just the original Unabom outfit. This is the only Unabom outfit. Because the Unabom outfit was also, what was he in Puerto Rico? Was it Doomsday?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, that was also the original Doomsday outfit that nobody was looking for, because Doomsday didn't get over. But when he was working Puerto Rico for Dutch Mantell, who was booking at that time, he was Doomsday and had the Unabom outfit on because he'd already had it made. And it was a Lord Humongous, homage / ripoff. And how many Humongouses had there been? And Sid at one point, before he was really Sid, was humongous. That's anytime you got a big guy, especially that was green, because that gimmick led itself to, can he do a power bomb and a choke slam and look big and not sell a lot? That was the gimmick to put on him. So that's what Dutch was doing to give Glenn some experience down there. And when he told me about him, I love the concept of having Glenn as the person, but Doomsday, that was when the Unabomber was still at large and, was in the news and etc. So, okay, what about Power Bomb Unabom? And his Power Bomb became the Unabom. And I never put a B at the end of it, but that's something that WWE Treasures and most people don't pick up on. There was never actually officially a B at the end of Unabom. He ended with an M. But so since it wasn't really a change in the gimmick, it was just a change in the name. He could do everything he had been doing. He could wear the same shit that he already had. Because it's not like, as I've referenced many times, when people put up screenshots of the Stormtrooper in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, I wasn't buying anybody's shit except the Heavenly Bodies. Everybody else was on their own. And I got Holly a robe one time. But anyway, so that's and also the Kane Glenn Unabom had just come into Smoky Mountain the first time that we got a chance to get dates on The Undertaker. And so that's why I didn't put them together at that time, because I thought it was too early. Because, you had to put The Undertaker over, not say he would have demanded not to do a job. But in that instance, you people see The Undertaker, he needs to be on the winning side, right? And I knew that Glenn was going to be a future opponent, but the first dates that we got on Taker were a 2-night, a Friday and Saturday night, in Pikeville, Kentucky for the Bluegrass Brawl, and Johnson City, Tennessee at Freedom Hall. And really the reason why we got him was for the Bluegrass Brawl. That was the third year in a row that we were going to be there. We'd sold out the previous two, turned people practice. Well, we didn't turn any away. We just put more in than we were supposed to. And how do you follow that 3 years in a row? That's when Mark was living in Nashville. I said, can we get Taker on his off day? And he agreed to do that. And then he, on the way back down the road, made Johnson City at Freedom Hall. And I had put him in 6-mans at that point so that he could be there. We could advertise him. The people could see him. He could come in and do his stuff. Everybody else could do their shit while he didn't get hurt, and then he could come in and make a comeback and then whatever. And we put with Bullet Bob Armstrong and myself and the Gangsters our top angle, right? But by that August, Glenn had been there and had been working with all those guys for almost 8 months. And he'd been in the ring with the Rock and Roll Express. He'd been partners with Al Snow and, had experience working with all the experienced guys in Smoky Mountain. So when I got a chance that for the Super Bowl event, I definitely wanted Undertaker. He hadn't been to Knoxville. We did sell out, by the way, in Pikeville, and we did our record house in Johnson City. But that's when I wanted to pull the trigger on having their first match, because now people are starting to look at Glenn. He's had more experience. He feels better in the gimmick. And at the same time, now I can, for my business purposes, I can beat Unabom. If it's the Undertaker it does it, it's not like that kills him. And that's a huge attraction for a match on that show, which ended up being a sellout. So, and obviously that was the point also where he had gotten ready to where I don't know if he had just come from Puerto Rico and, 6 weeks later he's having a match with the Undertaker earlier that year, if the response would have been as favorable, because he still really needed to get the benefit of not only Puerto Rico, you had some veterans, but he was working with a lot of guys in Knoxville who were either working directly with, WWE talent or had been involved with the company. So it was better that he had that 6 months to really get that experience before he got in the ring first time with Mark. And then as soon as that happened, instantly, I knew he would be a star in whatever he ended up doing. I was mortified when I heard about Isaac Yankem, as we've talked about, and I wasn't too much happier about Fake Diesel, but, they were already, as soon as that match happened in August, I knew they would be bringing him up sooner than later, and they did. I'll tell you one thing. You know what they're going to be looking for in some WWE warehouse in about 6 months that they can't find?
No, what's that?
Drake Wurtz's career. Have you heard about the latest from this fucking clown?
I don't know if I've heard the latest. I mean, A while back on the show, maybe a couple months ago, we started talking about stories that had emerged that he was on that Parlor app, and he may have had some white supremacist thoughts. I don't even know what exactly it was. I just know it's in line with all that.
I'll give you a summary here in a second. But for those who don't know, Drake Wurtz is a referee in NXT, or currently, maybe for not too much longer, is a referee in NXT. And he's the one that when we first started watching NXT, when this whole Wednesday Night War fiasco got started. Go back and listen to the shows, because it was in the first few weeks. I said to you, Brian, the referee of this match, once I saw this, I couldn't see anything else in the match but his face. It looked like he was wearing blackface. His neck was normal flesh tone. His ears were normal flesh tone. His arms and hands were normal flesh tone. And his fucking face looked like an old Three Stooges movie where the boiler blows up in their face and they turn around and they're fucking scorched. I said, what the fuck? I couldn't, this can't be natural. This has to be some type of something that's been applied to this fucking guy's face, right? And you went back and looked at the video and you said, I believe that this is just a person who has taken tanning to an extreme level. And I guess maybe he covers up his ears. I don't fucking know. But anyway, so we started finding out further about him. When we had mentioned that somebody said, oh, that guy, he started out in the business at one of these garbage deathmatch promotions as a wrestler, apparently, and somehow ended up in NXT as a referee. So then he made news as you were referring to several months ago, when he was on the Parler app, when they kicked all the right-wing insurrectionists and lunatics and conspiracy theorists off of Twitter, they went to Parler, and he was on Parler asking where all the patriots were in the area. He wanted to get more involved. Who knows doing what with these people? And he's a big QAnon guy. And we had brought that up, and you had gotten feedback from somebody that worked there that had interaction with him. I believe you described at the time as, you ever know somebody is just a really nice guy and really fucking stupid? Is the way was that approximately the way that was described?
Well, I remember hearing from a couple people that knew him or that know him that he is a very nice guy. That was the only feedback I had ever heard about the guy until all these stories started coming out.
Well, the latest news for Mr. Wurtz, and I just say this is courtesy of Uncle Dave. Uncle Dave and his many websites revolving around Wrestling Observer, Figure 4, whatever. It's the daily update for this past Wednesday. Apparently, old Drake Wurtz, you know when they have those city council meetings and local government and county commissioners, whatever, those meetings now, and they have a lot of them where people Zoom in or Skype in, right? And they show them on cable access sometimes, but this is on the internet, and so people got clips of this and put it out. There's old Drake Wurtz at the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners meeting, appearing via Zoom in his NXT logo referee shirt, while apparently somebody said he was Zooming from the Performance Center. But you could see the NXT bigger than fucking Christmas on his chest. Right? And so this is, I'm going to read the paragraph on the daily update. While at the WWE Performance Center and wearing a shirt with the NXT logo on it, NXT referee Drake Wurtz appeared via Zoom and spoke at last night's Seminole County Board of County Commissioners meeting. Calling himself a leader committed to fighting the evil of human trafficking and child exploitation, Wurtz argued against the county's mask mandate and, without evidence, claimed that continuing the mandate only puts vulnerable children at risk of being preyed upon by traffickers and predators. An emotional Wurtz. And I saw some of this video as much as I could stomach. He was in tears and looked on the verge of having a nervous breakdown. Like if somebody had just had their family kidnapped by Bigfoot in front of them and they were given the fucking report on the news, this guy was that worked up about it. An emotional Wurtz also claimed that normalizing face coverings makes it easier for sex traffickers to target kids in their community because nonverbal cues are often the first sign in identifying distress in a potential victim of human trafficking. And this is a partial transcript of what Drake Wurtz said. My name is Drake Wurtz. I'm a resident of Altamont Springs. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 3. I'm a volunteer in our community, and I'm a leader committed to fighting evil of human trafficking and child exploitation. Thank you, Commissioner Lockhart, for bringing this issue to a vote. You have a backbone. You have common sense, and your courage will be rewarded. I'm proud to live in Seminole County. I'm proud of the values that our county stands on. However, the draconian measures, the micro-tyranny, and overall harm to our children that this commission has allowed by continuing this mask mandate is inexcusable. When the science has come out suggesting that masks are harmful and ineffective than originally thought. Okay, possibly a transcription error. Or possibly a mental error. You choose to continue forcing citizens to wear them. My family and many others, we simply do not comply. So this asshole is one of the people walking around slobbering all over everybody, spreading disease in a public health crisis. My family and many others, we simply do not comply. We recognize tyranny and we know when to push back against it. We know our rights do not come from the local government. Our rights come from Almighty God. the next time that you get a parking ticket or your garbage day changes, I suggest call your local government. Don't try calling God. God gave we the people inalienable rights, and we entrust you as our elected commissioners and our elected officials to protect those rights. I'd also like to remind you all that all 5 of you are Republicans, which is probably why these fucking lunatics are being allowed to speak to begin with. Real Republicans, old Drake says, defend liberty at all levels. You received the vote to serve the people of Seminole County because you had an R next to your name on the ballot. Make no mistake, if you don't end this nonsense and start trusting your constituents to take personal responsibility by making their own informed decisions, you'll not get reelected. This guy is walking loose amongst people in a public health crisis where people are being encouraged to wear masks to prevent the spread of a communicable disease. The only thing he can think about is the preverts and the child predators that the rest of these Republicans see. What'd they say back in the McCarthy era? You see a communist behind every bush. We've actually got a legitimate public health crisis going on, and they're still on the fucking pedophiles. Why is it QAnon? Baby eating pedophiles with pedophile rings and pizza parlors, baby eating pedophile rings in Hollywood that drink people's blood, the baby eating and the pedophiles and the child trafficking. Is it fucking projection on the part of these Republican lunatics that they don't recognize? I mean, obviously there is a real problem of human trafficking, but I would say that the chances are greater that if you come along onto in public and see a 12-year-old girl wearing a mask with an older guy, it's probably somebody's daughter out to get ice cream and they don't want to get infected or infect anybody. Everybody with a kid wearing a mask is, I would say, probably the percentage would be very low that they would be child predators and traffickers, and very high that they would be responsible family members trying to do their patriotic duty in a fucking pandemic. But this fucking idiot, along with everything else, and the next item is Fightful reported that Wurtz had his duties reduced, or Wurtz had his dirties reduced. Wurtz had his duties reduced. And how bad is it when you have your duties reduced? Reducing of the duties. In recent months, he's no longer the head referee in NXT. And he says, I'm a husband, I'm a father of 3. Can you imagine the way those children are being raised?
What did you say early on? You said he describes himself as a leader in the...
I'm a leader committed to fighting evil of human trafficking and child exploitation.
Who's he leading?
In his own mind. It's like the South Park episode where every single person in town was a Yelp reviewer and thought that they were the only one whose voice was important. Whatever chemical doesn't fucking mix at the proper level in these fucking QAnon, right-wing, conspiracy theory people's brains, they think that they're fighting the lizard people and saving the world from all of the problems that it doesn't actually really have. And meantime, they're in the way of solving all the problems that we actually really do have, because they don't believe in those, because it's science instead of supernatural gods, and God didn't sign the goddamn Constitution, as we've mentioned before. But this, he's wrapped up in Almighty God and his inalienable rights to protect kids from child predators, just not actual legitimate health crises and diseases.
You know, it's never
good for him.
You know, it's never going to be in a history book. The problem with child trafficking was ended in 2021 by a referee for NXT, commonly known as the referee in blackface.
And who single-handedly made everybody quit wearing their masks in the United States of America. Coincidentally, That was 10 years ago, and our population is 25% of what it was then.
How many leaders actually say that? Yeah, hi, thank you for letting me speak today. I am a leader.
I am a leader.
And I'm here to tell.
That's what these people sit at home. They got nothing to do. They're easily fucking taken in. They're very gullible. And they read this shit on these right-wing sites or whatever, and they believe it. And then they get, you should have seen this. This guy was seriously worked up. It was almost like any of this shit he was talking about was actually a problem. But he believes it. And as Vince says, perception is reality.
So he was in the Performance Center when he zoomed in?
Apparently, he had the NXT shirt on, and Dave is reporting while at the WWE Performance Center. I had actually heard that other people had said that as well. Possibly he was there sweeping up as one of his reduced duties and decided he needed to jump in and save the kids from masks.
Well, that's the other thing. The idea of these thoughts and wanting to save people from these problems that you're not going to be doing anything about. Whatever you want to say. I mean, that's all crazy as it is. But that he thought all these things and said, hey, you know what? There'll be no problem me calling into this from work. Why would that be a problem? Yeah, I'm going to go sit down in the back and do that. That's the other crazy part. He didn't think there'd be any repercussions to doing this from WWE property.
Well, you know what it says? Sometimes people are nice. They just ain't too smart. But you know what? I got to be honest with you, Brian. Drake Wurtz has had a memorable career so far, and I bet you that when it's over very soon, he still has some moments that he'd like to relive and revisit, and maybe we could get him one of those Skylight frames. What do you think?
He can get his own.
Drake Wurtz Skylight frame.
I think he can get his own Skylight frame.
We could take up a collection. Everybody could give 2 cents because that's what he's worth to everybody is 2 cents. But if they got all together, because these things aren't expensive, the Skylight frames, it's a great bargain. And with Mother's Day coming up, folks, I don't need to tell you that you must take care of Mother and make her feel special. Even if it's your mother, somebody else's mother, any mother you know on Mother's Day, make them feel special, a Skylight frame. They're beautiful designer frames, but it's not just limited to one photograph. It's limited to your imagination because it's got the big 10-inch touch screen that you can load pictures on or send them by email. You can load the thing up and give it to somebody, or you can give them the frame, and then multiple people can email photos to it. You can preload it, as I said, with all the family pictures, and mom can just open it right up, or she can open it up and think, well, now I've got a frame, and then shit can start popping up. It'll surprise them. There's all kinds of ways you can do this. As a matter of fact, one of the reviewers said about their mother's frame, this gives her a little glimpse of us every day. And then when we talk on the phone, she can talk to the boys about the pictures that we sent. So it's something, if you can't be together, if you're separated by the vast distances of the great continental United States, whatever the case, go to skylightframe.com. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME, skylightframe.com, and enter the code DRIVE. That's because the drive-through gets preference over the experience with these people for some reason, even though it's just Brian Last show and not mine. But if you enter the code DRIVE, you'll get $10 off your purchase of a Skylight frame, skylightframe.com. Enter the code DRIVE, $10 off. For Mother's Day or any day that you want to give somebody a gift that'll cheer them up, go with the Skylight frame.
Good idea.
That's why I mentioned it. Oh, I'm full of good ideas. And here, I certainly am. Another couple of viewers have written in, and I got this. And Brian, this is another thing. Sometimes I get these business opportunities, and I run them by you. I wanted to check and see what you thought about this before I go any further, but it sounds like a pretty good deal. I just got this on Sunday, this past Sunday. It was 3:00 in the morning, but I'm sure because there's, between here and Europe, there's a time difference. But the email says, "Hi, my name is Mrs. Suzette Engelhorn Berg, a German citizen. I am a widow suffering from breast cancer and renal failure. As a result, I may not last till the next 2 months, according to my doctor's report. Well, immediately I was sorry to hear about this. I was married to my late husband, Mr. Engelhorn Berg, who worked with BASF Germany. I used to use their videotapes. And we were married for many years without a child before his death. I am 52 years old woman. I inherited the sum of 3.2 million euro from my late husband, and I am in serious need of a good and honest person who will claim the funds from the bank where it was deposited and funds used for donations to less privileged and orphanage homes, building schools for the destitute and disaster-affected people. And automatically this is hitting me, in my charitable nature. I decided to contact you for this donation as part of my contribution to help mankind, and I would be happy anywhere I may be. I do not need any telephone communication in this regards because of my present health condition in accordance to my doctor's guideline report. Get back to me so that I will direct you the bank where this funds were deposited by my late husband, Mr. Engelhorn Berg, to enable you retrieve the funds in my name as the next of kin if you can be able to carry out this humanitarian projects as I have wished. Best regards, Mrs. Suzette Engelhorn Berg. Should I help this lady, Brian? Yeah. I feel like I'm the only one that she can turn to.
Break her heart. Tell her that her husband was the father of Torberg.
That's it. That's a Torberg must have had my email address in his address book, and some family member has long ago and far away. And all right. There's an update on another email that we had earlier this week as well. You remember I read you the story of the guy who said that they had to build a cinder block outbuilding for his grandfather to watch wrestling in because he got dangerous. Well, Jeff from Indiana wrote in. I was listening to the experience from April 24th. There was a story of a listener whose grandfather had to watch wrestling from a small outbuilding because his grandmother couldn't handle his enthusiasm. I was surprised to hear someone else had this experience. While mine is not my grandfather, he is old enough to be. He was a truck driver that would come into my work. I would always talk to him because we were both wrestling fans. I loved hearing about his stories of going to the matches in Evansville with his dad in the 70s and 80s. Wait, this guy who's old enough to be Jeff's grandfather was going to the matches in Evansville with his father at the same time I was the fucking ringside photographer and working in all right. I guess time flies. Anyway, I loved hearing about his stories, especially the one about his dad getting so worked up that he tried to jump into the ring. He only made it to the apron, though. Anyway, he, too, had to watch wrestling in his garage. When we would talk wrestling, he would get so into it that he would start punching the air. Well, apparently he did the same when watching it on TV, because as he was enjoying the matches on his TV and the match became heated, cheering for the babyface to take out the heel and standing pantomiming his punches, unfortunately his wife was caught in the crossfire and got knocked out. So from then on, he was no longer allowed to watch wrestling in the house, and he was banished to the garage. Does anybody get that worked up over this horse shit anymore?
No way.
I didn't think so.
No way.
No way.
One guy's punching his wife. The other guy's getting a cement custom house to watch wrestling.
And hey, here's the thing is, and a lot of people are going, well, boy, they just must have been real idiots that believed in wrestling and nobody smartened them up or whatever the fuck, blah, 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 with the modern attitude that people have. When I first started going to Louisville Gardens, there was a woman. She was a nurse, but she was an older lady, probably in her 50s at the time. And, but she was friends, and I don't even know, and not in that way, but she was friends from years gone by with Jackie Fargo. She would bring him like a bottle every now and then of some Kentucky bourbon or whatever. And she had front row seats. She had 4 of them. And one of the ways that we first snagged front row seats, me and my mom, before that, we had met Miss Jarrett and I started doing the photography just as fans. two of this lady's usual 4-person party, I think it was her daughter and son-in-law, whatever, they moved away. So she had 2 extra tickets. So my mom made a deal with her to get us 2 front row seats, and because it was on her reservation. That's back in the days when the first 3 rows of ringside were reserved. The same people got them every week. If they hadn't picked them up by 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, they'd sell them, but, it was the same people. So that's how we first got front row seats. And
how did your mom find out? How did you guys find out that she had the available tickets?
Well, everybody was sitting there for an hour. What are you doing? It's not like that. It's not like today where, there was all kinds of loud music playing and everybody was, trying to sell you something. They opened the doors. You went to the concession stand. You went to the fucking merchandise stand. You sat in your ringside seat and you talked to all the people you saw every other Tuesday night. So, and my mom was a talkative person anyway. So she's talking to this lady because they're sitting and they're approximately the same age. And blah, blah, blah. But it was literally the same people in the same seats every week. And so, and then during intermission or before the matches, people from up in the general admission section would wander down and talk to the friends they had on the floor, blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
But where were you guys already sitting? If you got to the front row with this, where were you sitting before that?
Oh, we were usually 3rd row in the middle on the side the baby faces came in on, because that's as close as we could get without having a reservation. See? And what would happen is they would put the tickets for next Tuesday night on sale right after the first match. They'd take a 5-minute break and people got to know that. So what they would do is, and my mom started doing this, this is how bad they wanted to jump on the tickets for next week. They would come to the matches and they would stand in the lobby for the ticket window to open up after the first, so they'd miss the first match for the ticket window to open up to get the tickets for next week. And then by that time you come back, you see part of the second match or whatever. But anyway, so point being, this woman has been going every week since Jared had opened up the town, and probably had seen wrestling matches before that. And she was friends with Fargo enough to be giving him the bottle of bourbon and everything. And she knew as much as anybody did that it was a work, right? She didn't know none of us knew about bookers and things, but she knew from, just being there that long what was going on, right? But when she brought her nephew, who was a 30-something-year-old man, and he was sitting in the seat next to us one night. And she still sat there after I started taking pictures, and Teeny got us 2 tickets where I could keep my shit and stuff there anyway, blah, blah, blah. But the lady was still sitting there, and have just started as a photographer, and she's brought her nephew that's like in his mid-30s or whatever, and she's smart to the business, even though she, like I said, doesn't know the details. She knows it's a work on some level, as much as anybody did then. And she just comes because it's her Tuesday night thing. And front row tickets at that era were still $4. They hadn't gone to $5 yet. So what the fuck, right? But anyway, Lawler's kicking the shit out of somebody. He's a heel. Whatever the fuck's going on, the bell's ringing, the referee's been tossed out, some baby faces have run in, and I'm trying to get a picture of all the afterbirth that's going on, and all of a sudden, somebody elbows me in the ribs as they go by me, and right in between me and one of the ushers that's trying to hold that little clothesline rope that they used to put around the ring, hold it up so that nobody comes through. Somebody elbows me, goes in between that guy and up under the ropes, and gets immediately kicked in the face and gets the boots to him, and the uniformed Louisville police officers grab him by the feet and pull him out. It's that woman's nephew. Even if she's smart and she couldn't contain him, he was so worked up about what the fuck was going on. He hit the ring and got his head kicked in. So she was like, no, she had a hold of his wrist. He pulled away from her. It didn't matter if with that atmosphere. That's what I'm talking about, of heat and or just the atmosphere of the emotion and the passion you could feel in the building. Even if you knew it was all bullshit, when you saw the other people reacting, and it's like if you're the only person in an audience at a comedy show and a comedian's just talking to you, You might get a tickle, but you're not laughing. But when there's a bunch of people there and they're all laughing and you get started laughing, that's the way it was. And enough people were into that shit, life and death, that people would get lost. And they would go into fucking rescue mode. They would be convinced I am the only motherfucker in this. It's like old Drake Wurtz. Except they would be convinced I'm the only motherfucker in this building that's going to save Dusty. If I don't get in there, something bad's going to happen to him. So I've got to do it. And there you go.
You don't get that fan anymore. And I think back to another story that Kurt Brown told me from the WFIA 1980 in Atlanta when they were in attendance for the cage match, where Ole turns on Dusty and then the Assassins and Gene and Ivan, they're all beating up Dusty. I was
there.
Yeah, you were there, and you remember fans trying to get in there, trying to save Dusty. But the story I always think of is the one Kurt told, that he remembers looking down and there was just this one fan, kind of a jock, big muscular kid, just walking around all dejected after it. And he just sat in a random chair and just yells out, Dusty! Like, you'll never get that ever again.
But you know what you can get, Brian? A good night's sleep if you listen to us, because we know how to do it. Folks, if you want to get a good night's sleep, like I've had for the last year and a half when I haven't spent time in hotels, because, hotels not only have mattresses that are often used, but they also have mattresses that are affordable and cheap and all the other derogatory terms that you could apply to a crummy mattress. You want a good mattress for a good value that's worth the money and will give you great night's sleep for many, many moons to come. You want a Helix sleep mattress. We've talked about it on the pro. This is what Stace has enjoyed for her back surgery recovery. But Helix Sleep, they can fit your mattress to the way you sleep. All you do is go to, obviously, helixsleep.com, and you take a 2-minute quiz where they ask you your sleep preferences, and then they have soft, they have medium, they have firm. Whether you sleep on your side, back, stomach, whether you move around, they have mattresses that'll cool you down. They have mattresses for plus-sized folks, so even the McGuire twins amongst us can find rest on a Helix sleep mattress. And if you go to Helix, that's Helix, helixsleep.com/JCE, and take the 2-minute sleep quiz and let them match you up to a mattress. Helix is offering up to $200 off of all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. helixsleep.com/JCE, 10-year warranty, and you can try it out for 100 nights risk-free. And if you don't like it for whatever reason, possibly you're one of those people it's impossible to please, they'll pick it up for you. If you don't love it, you want to send it back. Anyway, don't be saggy at night. Sleep in a cloud. helixsleep.com/JCE.
What is this obsession you have with a puppy's belly?
Well, last week I said it was like sleeping in a warm puppy's belly.
That's
Can
right.
you think of anything softer and more that puts you in a better mood and makes you feel more loved than when you can just touch a warm puppy's belly?
But you said in a warm puppy's belly. That's where it gets a little weird, a little, may I say, sick.
Well, no. I'm talking about sleeping curled up next to, on top of. Hey, boy, you don't want to lay on top of the poor warm puppy, or else you'd squash the puppy.
That giraffe looks so nice. Let's cut its head off. I mean, that's what I hear.
No. You're not sleeping in the puppy.
That's what you said. That's what you said.
Okay.
In a warm puppy's belly.
In conjunction with a warm puppy's belly, a soft, loving, warm, fun, a place that makes you feel protected and safe. Joyous, even. A puppy's belly.
Well, I don't know about all that, but I will say Helix mattress, fantastic. We love it here.
Well, my puppy loves it too.
I hope your puppy's safe. I hope your puppy's safe after this conversation.
No, my puppy. Oh, I don't you talk about my puppy. Anyway, all righty. Should we go to our interview portion of the program? At this point, we mentioned it, but we got nothing else to talk about except modern wrestling. So we should go to the interview portion of the program.
Okay, we could do that right now.
Okay, we can do that. All right. Well, then I will let the people know, Brian, that the new season 3 of Dark Side of the Ring, premieres on Vice TV on Thursday night, May the 6th at 9:00 Eastern. It's a 2-hour special on Brian Pillman. And they've also, Vice has a Dark Side of the Ring marathon all day. If you want to get caught up on last season, they've got the extended cuts. They're playing the thing 24 hours that day. And we have the creators, the director, producer. They do everything on this program. Evan Husney and Jason Eisner. We are going to go to that interview that has been recorded, and we will do that portion, and then we will come back with the rest of this fine program. Is that correct, Mr. Last?
I believe so, Mr. Cornette.
Well, let's do that now. All right, the long-awaited interview, and nobody has awaited this interview any longer than the people we're about to talk to, the creators of the Dark Side of the Ring, Evan Husney and Jason Eisner. Season 3 is about to debut, and you guys have done it again.
Hey, Jim, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, it was on the comment that I made was on one of the spots announcing season 3 when I said, can't y'all do the happy side of the ring once in a while?
Yeah.
But also, and I'm so upset because every time you come to the castle and shoot these things, it's always dreary winter weather, no leaves on the tree. Everything's barren and brown. For the last 6 weeks, I've had the dogwood is beautiful, pink blooms, everything's in green and looking lovely. And you guys never shoot down here this time of year. You always wait until it's all barren and cold and wintry. It fits the flavor of the show better. You don't want a lot of sunshine and lollipops.
I know.
You want it looking like the old Dark House, or something when we shoot it.
But you always mention to us that tree is blooming, and even the other day, like the thought came across my mind. I thought, like, I bet that tree is blooming right now. Because I think you mentioned to us like every time we come over, and it's like, man, I can't wait to see that because it just sounds so beautiful, and you are so like proud of it. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, get your shooting schedules in order where you can come down here in good weather. You could be down here on Derby weekend and pay $400 for one night in a hotel room. But anyway, the Dark Side of the Ring is debuting this Thursday, May the 6th, 9 p.m. Eastern. The 2-hour Pillman show will be the debut episode. And, Brian and I have been talking about it on the show here the past few weeks. A lot of these, not wrestling programs, but more behind the scenes programs about wrestling, about wrestlers, are taking over a lot of the networks. The A&E Austin bio was the biography episode was the most watched biography episode on that network in 16 years.
Oh,
the Dark Side of the Ring, that just came out this past week. The Dark Side of the Ring, season 1 was the highest rated series in Vice TV history. Season 2 beat that. Season 3 will probably beat that. They've got some other reality shows about wrestling. These shows about either great wrestling stars or just the inner workings of the wrestling business are outdrawing the actual wrestling shows. And I mean, it's an indictment of my former business that's happening, but the difference in what you guys are doing and the biography series, obviously, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Randy Macho Man Savage, Roddy Piper, they're going for the names. They're going for the household names that people knew and watched, and they're going for it in that respect, and they're getting numbers. But you guys, even though you have done major personalities and major names, especially in season 1, when you had to kind of get people educated what the deal was, you guys are going for the stories. You're telling stories. How important a guy was in the wrestling business only figures in part of it. It's also, how can we tell this story, and is this a story that somebody needs to tell, even if it's not a major name? And I think that's the difference in the programs.
Yeah, I can't see Johnny Canine making A&E part of that season, but and that is the cool thing, with being able to I mean, especially getting into a season 3, it's just really cool that we're able to explore stories like that. I mean, this guy is probably virtually relatively unknown to most wrestling fans, like Johnny Canine, Bruiser Bedlam, and so it's cool to be like, here in 2021, let's spend an hour with him on cable television. I think that's awesome.
Well, I think it's great because we talked, you guys and I, when we shot stuff for the first season, and we were all being honest with each other. This is a new program. People, obviously, the wrestling fans are going to be interested in the premise, but you had to kind of balance things with, we can't go to a deep album cut first season. We can't go to somebody that nobody's ever heard of, even if it is a fantastic story or an engrossing story, but we have to strike a balance. And now that the people have seen the programs, and it kind of, the program more stands on its own now, even if you are not necessarily familiar with who the subject is, it's going to be some kind of wild ass tale. And
yeah.
So, you have the names this season. We'll talk about a few of them, here in a few minutes, but you've got the Ultimate Warriors, and you've got the Brian Pillmans, but you've also got, as you said, Bruiser Bedlam, Johnny Canine, Chris Kanyon, which I can't wait for, because what a great guy he was. I just heard about Luna Vachon. And you're going to be tackling that this year. And of course, we already knew about, Grizzly Smith and the whole Smith family. So obviously the star of that to the public is Jake Roberts. He's the member of the family that most people know, but you're going a little bit deeper into guys that were either names in the territories or guys that were never names, but they have these weird stories. And that's why I'd mentioned Bruce. I got my my request honored this season with Bruiser Bedlam, because I said, where else are you going to find a story like this? And this guy that was literally two people to, it depended on who you were as to which one you saw. But let's talk about Brian Pillman.
Sure.
Because also that's the debut, and that's the one that I've seen the screener of. And you assholes, every time you do one of these shows, I mean, I probably won't break down in tears over the plane ride from hell episode or, the steroid trial episode. But every time you do one of these shows about somebody that I've known personally, at one point I end up having to pause it and walk away. And this, in the Pillman episode, it's 2 hours. There was a couple of those spots, and most of them, all of them, really centered on the comments that Brian Jr. made. And I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody, or there's no way I could deliver it the way it was said. But it really got to me. Especially, Brian was younger than I was when my dad passed away, and that's hard anyway. But for him to be left in the situation that he was in after his dad passed away is probably the worst part about it. And hearing him describe some of those things, he's breaking down, and I had to break down. I mean, you can read about these stories all day, but when you actually hear the family members speak and see their emotions, I think that's what makes these programs different from just the standard wrestling documentary that, gets a few talking heads in the business.
Yeah, I think, especially with this story, it's like, we always had a huge interest in Brian Pillman for the show because, the main, I don't know, the things for us that we want to explore with this show is always kind of where the character stops and the real person takes over, or vice versa. Sort of that blurred lines aspect is kind of the most fascinating area to really dig into for us in this show. And I think that's what really makes it interesting to non-fans. And so when we were looking into this story, and I think it was around last season where I had got a copy of Crazy Like a Fox, the book by Liam O'Rourke, which is just amazing. Yeah. And that just really detailed a lot of what was happening, outside of the wrestling side of his story. And that really opened my eyes. And then when we started filming it, we didn't think it would be a 2-hour show, to be honest, which is crazy in hindsight, because as soon as we started putting it all together, and we interviewed Brian Jr. especially and the other family members, and started to realize the story doesn't end with Brian's passing. There's a whole other, even more than an epilogue. There's a whole other couple of chapters there and of their whole story, and that to us really was like, wow, we need the full 2 hours to tell this story. And yeah, Brian Jr. is just so amazing in that episode, and just what that family's had to go through, and of course just the complexity of the relationships between everybody in that family, and I think that really comes through. And and kudos to Brian Jr. for even though those relationships are very complicated to this day, he still recognized and was advocating that all members of his family do have a voice in the show, because it is important, and I think that really kind of makes it something more than just kind of a wrestling story.
Well, Brittany, at one point, she makes the comment, and it just hits you in the face that by the time she was 2 years old, neither one of her biological parents were still alive.
I think
and
she was
all
like
of a
7.
sudden,
yeah,
was she a 7, whatever, young enough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the point of all of a sudden here, she's by the changing relationships, and then the new boyfriend comes in. She's living with 2 completely different parents.
I know.
Than who she started out with, and Brian was so young, and left without his dad there. And I'll tell you one thing. You guys, I don't know whether you showed restraint or it just didn't fit and you didn't have to do it anyway. Because I'm sure I know that there's probably some stories that some people told you during this taping about Melanie Pillman that with details that you could have just played 1 or 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And people would have been after her in the town square with pitchforks and trying to burn her at the stake.
Right.
And that is that's the impression you're going to get from the program anyway when you watch it. But you guys exercised restraint in letting the viewer have that reaction on their own instead of all the information that you could have given them that would reinforce that opinion. She is the heel of the piece, whether intentionally or not. And everybody that was around Brian, in his life at that time probably feels the same way. But I mean, kudos to her for at least, being there. I mean, the years have not been kind, and this is a case of going literally from penthouse to the outhouse. But she did it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just, I'm very happy that we were able to get her, for this, because, I mean, a lot of it is, her story as well. And, it goes back to what Jason and I wanted to do with this show from the very beginning. Dark Side of the Ring is the name. That's the name of the show. But really, it is the human side of the ring, as we've talked about before. It's really showing the complexities of not just the wrestlers, but the family members around these subjects, and how complicated life is. It's not so simple or black and white. And I think with this season in particular, with this episode and with some of the other ones, the Nick Gage one comes to mind too, is it's like we're really kind of capturing a snapshot of a story in that present moment. That story might not be over. Like a Brian Jr. story isn't definitely over. Right. It's just starting. And same with Melanie and her journey to reconcile and to come together with her family, if that's possible, So that was something we really wanted to show. And there are some things where I feel like there are semi-double standards in their story as well. I mean, Brian wasn't the most faithful husband either, and so it's kind of like we wanted to just show all of that. We wanted to show that, this was a wild marriage, and some and we wanted just to show the real drama behind all that.
Yeah, and seeing the relationship between Brian Pillman Jr. and his mom today. Yeah. Like, I think that's something a lot of people could probably relate to that have like fractured relationships like with their parents and loved ones. And so to kind of see that honesty, between the two and how they are, still currently working out their relationship today, I think is pretty powerful to see.
That was, and I will say that without trying to spoil anything, just when Brian says, well, what am I supposed to do? Hate my mother or, all my life or whatever. Right. That's heart wrenching in itself. But, and you mentioned the Gage thing, the the bank addicted drug robber. I love you guys, but I wish you wouldn't take forays outside professional wrestling and validate these garbage wrestling goofs by calling them professional wrestlers. But I'm sure it'll be an interesting story. Who else is stupid enough to rob a bank with no mask on camera when you're a public figure and then go to the casino in Jersey with your winnings? But anyway,
did you see the episode somehow?
No, I had his number as soon as he walked through the door.
Okay.
We've heard all those stories, but anyway, you're also another one of the subjects coming up, and there's going to be 2 sets of season. This is public knowledge, right? That the season's going to be in 2 sets.
Yes,
that's right.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna have the first season for 6 weeks. With the 2-hour special, and then you're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with the second half. And I'm not sure where this fits in. I believe it's the second half, but the steroid trials of the WWF in 92, 93 are going to get covered. And you guys actually got, and he will be appearing on camera, Jerry McDevitt to give their side of this story. How many souls did you have to sell to make this a reality?
Actually, it was quite easy. We've been, the steroid trials, one of the more significant moments in wrestling history outside the ring of the 90s for sure. Was just very, very, something always on our radar that we wanted to tell. But back in season 1, when we first considered it, we had just no street cred or, ways to get that level of access to tell that story properly. And it's just a really dense subject, in order to find, how are you going to wrap your head around it? And I think after doing 2 seasons of the show, it's been easier for us to crack that. But we needed an anchor. We needed a big anchor to build the episode around. And then the idea was sort of pitched I think we were referencing Fog of War, let's do it kind of Fog of War style with Jerry McDevitt. And so I reached out to him and to his I think his assistant, and left her a message, and then he called me back and we spoke, and he had some words for me on the Owen Hart episode, of course, but he he did for sure, which, okay, I understand. But we had talked those out, and then I pitched him the idea. I was like, I just want to tell this story. And, more or less the steroid trials is a masterclass of Jerry McDevitt's ability as an attorney. I mean, he's an incredible attorney. And so he thought about it. I'm sure he spoke to WWE about it, I would only assume, and then came back and said, let's go. And so we wound up doing 2 long form interviews with Jerry. We just finished the second one recently, and it's just fantastic, and it's really cool, I think, too, for us to be able to show that a company perspective in this series, and I'm really grateful for that, because this story, in a lot of ways, it's I don't know. I don't think Vince is necessarily the heel in this story, as he has been in some other stories of ours. But, this is kind of Vince looking at the kind of dark aspects of the story is kind of happening to Vince as he's looking for possible, jail time, in terms of for the charges that the government had against him. But it's also just a wild story of, wrestling playing out into the courtroom, the wrestling storyline coming out of the courtroom. And you look at the dramatic relationship between Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. Hulk Hogan had to testify against Vince, and that was right at the time he had left to go to WCW. And the drama behind that is better than any wrestling pay-per-view you could book, So all of that's just really fascinating. And Jerry was great. And I'm really looking forward to digging into that. We're still actively working on it. Because it's part of the back half, but did you guys actually find out whose post toasties did Vince piss in to really get that whole ball rolling? Because, and now some people are going, oh, now he's defending Vince after all these years. In the overall scheme of major drug transporters, steroid distributors, where would Vince McMahon have ranked if he hadn't? He had to piss somebody off or say something to somebody he shouldn't have said to start that whole ball rolling originally. Well, there was a lot of heat on, George Zahorian went down first, and for those who don't know, who are listening, George Zahorian was appointed by the Athletic Commission in the 80s,
right?
And he was the doctor that would check you out and approve you to go into the ring. But he was also a guy who was, selling steroids in a way to the wrestlers, and then the
Dr. Feelgood. It wasn't just steroids. The boys need their candy, and if you got something wrong with you, etc. Yeah.
Exactly. But then the law changed. Don't quote me because I don't have my notes in front of me, but I think around 1990, the law changed, classifying, selling drugs or selling steroids in that way or distributing them without a therapeutic use. That became basically like a heroin if you're dealing like those kind of drugs. That's how it was classified. So he's kept on doing that, while the law was changed, and then eventually so brazenly, and that's when he got nabbed for it. And then because, he was, in wrestling, but it's such a bizarre thing. It's such a bizarre story because it's like, steroids, like, and how it's really like, the way the public perception of it too was like, well, this is cheating. It's cheating if you're using steroids in like a football or another sport realm, but to question it in wrestling is kind of odd. But
it was really the neither fish nor fowl thing because, well, it doesn't help them, win the match or whatever, but it's still the same chemical being ingested and et cetera, et cetera. Right. Just people couldn't pigeonhole the use in wrestling with things in other sports and stuff they could wrap their heads around.
Right. And I think that when the law changed, it probably seemed to the prosecution at the time, and WWF being probably more of an easy target because, they did have some information based upon, which we'll get into in the episode. We can go down this for the rest of the show. But, there is a lot of there's a lot of weird jurisdictional bizarreness. The charges against Vince were really weird. It was like the charge was actually, he was charged with possibly defrauding the FDA, which is a weird charge. And so ostensibly it required Jerry to become the most well-informed, researched human about steroids up to that point. And he was able, the one thing that's amazing about Jerry in this case is that, Vince is being charged by the federal government, and Jerry wins this case calling not a single witness, which is kind of insane if you think about that. Like, they're just bringing all these guys up to the stand, and it's all just Jerry's cross-examination skills that won this case.
Yeah, and there was an element of the gang that couldn't shoot straight on the other side, but that's
right, for sure.
That's the thing about the Mark doctors. And I remember there was one in the late 90s from Indianapolis that came up and got on the radar. And I was in some of the meetings with Joel Hackett. Mm-hmm. Something happened to him. I don't know. Maybe I've just slandered an innocent human, but he was banned and the boys were told to stay away from him because he was doing. See, the thing is, it's a double-edged sword. When you get a Mark doctor that will give the boys anything they ask for, invariably, those Mark doctors will also tell everybody in the world that they're giving the boys what they ask for.
Right.
And that's how shit like this takes place. And Vince, as we know, was concerned about it. And very well, if they'd have gotten a better case together and figured out where Long Island was and it wasn't in the state of Connecticut or whatever all those loopholes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It might have been a different story, and Jerry Jarrett would have been running the WWF. Imagine that. And you also, did you pass any conversation with Mr. McDivitt on the Ultimate Warrior episode? Because that's going to be a fun one, I'm sure. That has to be an episode of Perry Mason and Matlock rolled into one. The majority of Warrior's dealings with Vince were through lawyers.
Yeah. I did ask Jerry a bit about it, when we were corresponding over the phone, but he for him, it was kind of like, yeah, there were some issues here and there. And, for him, it wasn't of a primary concern like the steroid trials were. But yeah, the Ultimate Warrior episode, is definitely we're just finishing up actually today. It's very interesting.
Well, Warriors' legal claims were never based in very much evidence or reality, but God, there was a ton of them. He made up for it in quantity, what he lacked in quality. But they've done the hit pieces in the past when the Office was on the outs with the Warrior, and then they did a nicer one when he was back on. This is, I would assume, going to be a fair, even-handed assessment of Ultimate Warrior, which means that everybody's going to bury him because nobody liked him. Would that be correct, or am I too far afield?
Well, Jason, I've been yammering. You want to?
Yeah, like there's been, there's a couple people who tended to bury him, but we were, I was a fan of Ultimate Warrior growing up. I was born in 1982, and so I was a prime audience for the Ultimate Warrior, and I had his action figures. And it's kind of like how you say in the episode, it's like as you grow up older as a fan of that character, and then when they tried to bring him back later on in the 90s, wrestling had changed at that point, so he didn't really quite fit into it. And then as he kind of faded off from wrestling and started doing more public speaking engagements, and he would speak very controversially, and so that made me as a fan really grapple with my fandom for him. But to get to interview his very first wife, Sherry Tyree, who was with him through the first 10 years of his career, and to hear her perspective of watching his very fast rise, and what made Jim Hellwig the person that he is, and what were some of the things that he dealt with in his childhood that have made him who he is, and why he may have went through the business and handled certain relationships in certain ways. Her interview really gave us I think a bit more perspective on who he was as a person and why he kind of lived his life so fast.
Yeah, and I think it's we didn't really ever intend a lot of these episodes that are in season 3. We've kind of thought about years ago about eventually getting around to. Ultimate Warrior really wasn't one that I think we ever thought of or considered until recently, and it was mostly due to the fact that our viewers just were insistent and demanded that we do a story about Ultimate Warrior. And I tried to kind of wrap my head around what would the story kind of be, because obviously his passing is just wild. The circumstances around reconciling with Vince after that just tumultuous relationship, and then dying less than or whatever 24 hours later is just insane, and that's compelling. But obviously there is these two extremes of the self-destruction of Ultimate Warrior documentary, and then of course the one they did when they brought him back, and it was just kind of what's left there. And then when we did reach out and meet and talk to Sherry, his first wife, they were married for 10 years, I think 9 or 10 years. And for her, it's her perspective. This episode almost is kind of her story, because it's about she meets Jim when he's a bouncer, and he's on a path to being a chiropractor. He's just a normal, semi-normal guy, and they're going to have a semi-normal life. And then all of a sudden his need to be in the spotlight just kind of changes everything. And they, he becomes a bodybuilder, and now he's going to meet Sting and becomes a wrestler. And then he meteorically rises to, stardom very quickly. And it's just kind of this wild roller coaster ride. But I think one of the things about this episode that's very compelling is that I think Sherry does a good job of like we're saying with the Pillman and everything else, it's just kind of bringing more of a human side to a complicated human portrait of who this guy is. And yeah, you're right. It was really hard to find people who wanted to speak positively about him. But I think the episode does push beyond just oh my gosh, this guy was really difficult. What a nightmare, into let's try to understand at least where he's coming from. And I do think that one thing that was eye-opening to me, and it's not an excuse obviously for some of his behavior, but the idea that from a very young age, he was absolutely aware of, his heart disease running in his family, and his father and his grandfather died very young from that. And I think that was always in the back of his mind, is that he knew his time was going to be very short. And then it leads you to believe how much was he really aware of that, in the last year of his life, So I don't know.
I'm not sure that I would have gone so heavy on the monkey hormones if heart disease was running that rampantly in my family, but
right.
Which it has, and which is I'm not a big guy for monkey hormones, but here's the thing with some of the guys you profile.
Mm-hmm.
And Pillman ticks both these boxes, but invariably it's either a big star that wasn't a likable person or a likable person that never got to be a big star. But boy, it's a sad story, like a Chris Kanyon. I don't know which one Johnny Canine falls in. The likable guy that blew up the police station. He was the friendliest police station bomber ever. And then Dynamite Kid, who
right.
I never got to meet in the dawn of the home videotape era.
Mm-hmm.
When I first got a chance to see Dynamite Kid in Japan, I'm like, my God, this guy's the baddest ass on earth. His work is immaculate. He's in condition. You think he can run 300 miles without blowing up. Yeah. I've never seen anybody just exert that level of realistic violence and badassery in pro wrestling, and it was amazing. And then you come to find out that he was pretty much a miserable human being in most cases to be around. And I never got to meet him in person. I was a huge fan, and then I've heard stories from Davey Boy Smith, but that what a strange and what's the word I'm searching for? Help me, you creative people. You've got this guy who's a super talented, performer and athlete, but he's always miserable as a human being.
Well, Jason, feel free to chime in too. But I mean, for my money, it's hard. Like those matches with Tiger Mask. It's hard to see better wrestling than that, for me. Like when I watch that, I think it's the type of wrestling that like somebody who knows nothing about wrestling at all whatsoever, and they walk into the room and they see it on your TV, like that would captivate their attention. It's really it's like the highest level, I think, for sure.
It was what these guys have been trying to copy for the past 40 years since then, is that somehow they did a video game wrestling match and made it look legitimate. And when they got away with it, because here's the two most talented athletes in the world at what they're doing, then everybody else said, oh, well, we can do this too. And then you get a bunch of cover bands.
Well, but the only consequence of that is that it was probably pretty friggin' real. I don't know how.
Yeah. Also, when he ended up in a wheelchair. Later. Right. So,
got that asterisk. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and a lot of the folks we interviewed for the episode, I mean, we talked to Mick Foley for the episode, who you might not think is the first, name to interview for the Dynamite Kid episode, but he talks about this story of like, he was such a huge fan of the British Bulldogs, and actually one of it was Jack Foley he was wrestling under the name of, and as one of his first matches was as a jobber in WWF, and he goes in there and he's like all excited, and then Dynamite gets tagged in, and then he clotheslines Mick and basically dislocates his jaw with one clothesline. And, and then he's, wind up, not eating solid food for 3 weeks and, barfing into a toilet for the next couple of days. And it's, he worked, a lot of that stuff is not a magic trick because it looks so good. It's because it's real. And, he's really launching himself in, like, when you see him take those guardrail bumps, you just know that that's no good.
Yeah.
The
first time that I ever actually got to talk to anybody who had been around Dynamite in person was when Danny Davis, my old partner in OVW, had worked Calgary, and he came back to Tennessee and was telling me in the early 80s about, they have these ladder matches, and this guy, Dynamite, would do a thing where he would be standing up on the top of the ladder, and one of the Hart brothers, whoever, would drop kick it, and he would go over, standing on the ladder, he'd go over with the ladder, bounce off the top rope and out to the floor without touching anything. And then, of course, then Danny would say, I don't know how long he's going to be walking, but this guy is the most amazing thing you've ever seen. And, it's another cautionary tale of guys. But I've said this, almost all of these guys in their own way, whether it's on Dark Side, whether it's on the biography, whether anytime you have a major wrestling star, they sacrifice a lot of their personal life. They sacrifice a lot of their health. They sacrifice sometimes, I've done this, some of my sanity for to be, while they're in this, especially to be the best at what they do. And that's why people remember them, because they were the best at what they do. But sometimes that's also why these kind of shows get made about them, because none of these guys were, an average CPA in fucking Brentwood.
Right.
And so you have to admire sometimes the dedication, but in some case, and where is the line? Where do you say, well, he took it too far? Well, sometimes the line's not clear until you've already crossed over it. And then you're like, shit, it was back there, wasn't it? Well, we're here now.
Yeah, especially with Dynamite Kid, it's such a clear example, especially with his, we interviewed both his daughters, and, he basically like sacrificed a relationship with his two daughters. And so we spent time with them, and to hear how they've kind of navigated their life, past, since their father has passed away, but also before he had passed away, and, trying to get some sort of relationship with him. But it is very tragic, and it does bring home the reality of, the sacrifice that goes into, the wrestling business and the ramifications on the family.
It really is like this, just, the Dynamite Kid story is a tragedy of Greek proportions, in a lot of ways, because here is the ultimate sacrifice. And again, it's why Mick is such a great voice for the episode too, because I think he can relate to that in some ways too, in terms of the physical sacrifices he's made to create the, his legacy as well. But, for Dynamite, it's like to have gone to sacrifice it all for the sake of his art, for it to be as real and believable as possible. And then just to find the fact that he wound up in a wheelchair before 40, alone and broken is wild. And obviously, he raised a lot of hell, through all of that, with all of his relationships with fellow wrestlers and his family, of course. And that's a huge part of the story. But I think also what's compelling about it is, and I think that this episode in particular is going to spark a lot of conversation after it comes out, is also just, you can tell that his family is still trying to reconcile with the legacy, because it is complicated. It's maybe one of the more complicated legacies in all of wrestling, in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's one episode that nobody dies. Few people got fired, but it's not really a dark side. If there's a tomfoolery episode, a shenanigans episode of Dark Side of the Ring, it's got to be the plane ride from hell. And this was by popular demand, a viewer suggestion, right? Or just everybody said, hey, you got to do this, because it's taken on a life of its own. It's that there's no grieving, surviving family to do sound bites, but this is just a bunch of alleged grown adults acting like lunatics. And it's why, besides, when I was with the WWF, they did not have a private plane. But I heard about some overseas flights where people would be on a commercial flight with too much time on their hands. That's why I never crossed the ocean and would not have flown in a WWE company plane with these jolly jokers. I loved Crockett's plane back in the 80s when it was all the boys just having fun. And occasionally you might get, if you went to sleep, Bobby Eaton would take your shoelaces out and put them in upside down and tie them together at the bottom. That was a terrible rib. But this just went completely out of hand and fucked with everybody to this day.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, since we started working on Dark Side of the Ring, pretty much any wrestling fan we've run into are like, oh, well, if you're going to do Dark Side, wrestling stories, like, you got to cover the plane ride from hell. And, we never really were able to figure out how, at the time during season 1 and season 2, how to, tell that story in 45 minutes or to extend it that long. But then when season 3 came along, we had to make 14 episodes. We thought, well, let's put some serious research behind this and see, what the story is. And, the more we dug deeper into it and did research and talked to more people who were on that airplane, it's been this story for years that has kind of been looked at as like kind of locker room foolishness or just boys being boys kind of thing. But when you really hear from some of the people who worked on that flight, there were things that happened that I could see being very traumatic, and they were. And it, really brings home the title, The Plane Ride to Hell. It sounded like it was really hell.
See, that's the thing. Everything that I've heard that happened on that flight, I can picture and see happening in a locker room, a wrestling locker room in some territory anytime over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
But not all at the same time and not at 35,000 feet.
Yeah,
that would have been where I had the fucking issue. I mean, wait a minute.
Yeah, I think there's
enough when Mad Dog Vachon tried to open the back door on Vern Gagne's fucking private plane with 6 people on it, but this was a jet.
Yeah. Yeah, this episode, I think, for me, was really tricky to try and wrap my head around for the show, because historically on shoot interviews, YouTube, you can go down the plane ride rabbit hole, on YouTube, and for a lot of it, it's talked about and chronicled as tomfoolery, like you were saying, like that's how people consider it. And I have to tell you that after cutting this whole thing together, and we have like a rough cut right now because it's not finished, this is one of the more anxiety-inducing fucking episodes of this show that I have ever, and this is in its rawest form.
Yeah.
Of absolute fucking horror show, and I don't know. This is crazy. This is like, I would never have thought that this episode would be as dark and disturbing and horrifying as it is. And I'm not exaggerating, because the context is everything too, where it's like the roster just got through this grueling European trip, and they're on their way back, and this crew has been with the wrestlers the whole trip throughout Europe, because the same plane for the whole trip, and they're at the final day where they're flying back across the Atlantic, and there's a weather delay and in Stamford, and the delay is 7 hours, so the plane is actually parked on the tarmac for 7 hours. And what are they doing? Well, they're going through carts and carts and carts of booze. I've never actually heard of when you run out of one cart, they'll bring you another one type of situation. But this definitely was what was going on. And then as you're understanding this, knowing what you know about this world and some of the characters that are on this flight, it's just like, oh man. And it just goes from there. And then I think that there's elements of this story that people are going to be very surprised in where it goes. And it gives me anxiety. It keeps me up at night, actually. It's an anxiety-inducing episode.
These are the things that keep us up at night. Well, what else keeps you up at night? Now, season 3, that may not all be dusted off and polished and sorted and everything, but the subjects, the shows are scheduled, but who or what do you still want to do? There's going to be a season 4. These things are, especially with my appearances, highly rated. People just clamoring to see more. What else have you still got up your sleeve, or you still want to do if you could get a hold of them, or the right people, or the right way to tell the story?
Yeah, I think one just off the top of my head is the story of Gentleman Chris Adams, and how when we did season 1, we kind of structured this like Texas World Class Championship Wrestling trilogy, which was the Bruiser Brody episode, the Von Erich episode, and the Gino Hernandez episode. And we always thought like, the Chris Adams story like fits within that like universe with those 3 episodes. Mm-hmm. And when we were when we're interviewing people for the show and his name comes up, it's always followed by the most insane story you've ever heard. There's so many like crazy Chris Adams stories where he's super kicked a bartender in the face and knocked their eyeball out, and they've had to smuggle him out of Israel back to America in the middle of the night. Kevin Von Erich told us like this insane story where kind of like a plane ride for hell situation. He was drinking on the plane and he got cut off by the flight stewardess, and he got so angry that the pilot came back to try and calm him down, and he headbutted the pilot in the face and busted him open, like just bleeding everywhere, and he was bleeding all over Chris's shirt. And Kevin, like being such a good-hearted guy, was like, Chris, like, why don't you give me your shirt and I'll wear the bloody shirt and I'll talk my way out of this situation. And as soon as they land, it was like, you know, FBI cops on the plane, and they arrested Chris, and you know, he did some time for that. But and then when you hear about the ending of his life,
I don't know if I'd want to be put in a position where Kevin Von Erich had to tell a bullshit story to defend me on the spot. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's you know, and when you hear the story of the end of his life and his best friend killing him out of self-defense, it's so hard to believe, but that's something we've always, you know, even from season 1, it was a story we wanted to tell. But who knows? Maybe now that we did an interview with Stone Cold Steve Austin, you know, he would want to be part of that episode because he was so close to Chris and was trained by him, and that would be really cool.
Mm-hmm. And for me personally, it's like I am excited, of course, by, you know, the fact that Jerry McDivitt appeared on the show, and it's kind of like, for lack of a better term, reaching across the aisle, you know, to see if maybe there is a chance that some of the folks who are still, you know, over there in WWE, you know, because I'm assuming that he would have had to have gotten official permission to do that there's a chance that we can work with some of those and folks over there to tell stories. And I think that one of the ones that I would jump at, and I've said it, you know, before more recently, is, man, I'd love just to get Michael Hayes and do a Freebirds episode. Like I can't see why that can't happen. Some epic sweeping, you know, could get into, you know, Terry Gordy and, you know, and you know, and get into Buddy's story and all that stuff. I think it would be fantastic.
And especially the early years of the Freebirds, with them driving up and down the road in Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee and Louisiana and wherever, though, that would have been a reality show all itself. Bobby Eaton used to ride with the Freebirds in Georgia. And he said one time the four of them, Buddy and Terry and Michael and Bobby, in either Michael or Terry's or Buddy's old car, right? But they get pulled over by the cops, and the cop walks up to the car, and it may have been Buddy Roberts driving. He opens the door, and when he opened the door, not only did a sea of empty beer cans fall out, but the whole indoor panel of the door just fell right off the actual door and out into the fucking interstate. And the cop just took a look at, he knew from television, it's the Freebirds. He just took a look at him. He turned around and walked back to his car and got in and drove off just to go away. That, amazing. You know, because he didn't want to, he knew that if he went down that rabbit hole with those four guys in that car, not only would everybody know who they were, but he'd be there all night. And he just said, fuck it. But a Freebirds episode. Yeah. If you could shoot at Freebird Mountain, that might be very interesting.
Totally. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah, that one's definitely.
And of course, this season, Harley Quinn gets her obligatory close-up that's written into the contract with Vice. And it's in slow motion, so that's even better, with her cute little tongue and everything.
Amazing.
Well, guys, again, it's season 3 that debuts on Thursday night, May the 6th at 9 p.m. Eastern. 2 hours on Brian Pillman. Now, is it going forward on Thursdays? Is it going to be 9 Eastern or 10 Eastern for the regular 1 hour programs?
I should know.
I just asked you a question that you don't know. Well, check their local listings. Check your local listings, folks. But
I think it's
2 hour
10.
premiere. I think they did that last year too. 2 hour premiere on the 6th at 9 o'clock, and then probably going to 10 o'clock for hours for the rest of the first set of the season. But anyway, Jason and Evan, thank you guys for being on. Thank you for making me a part of the program. I enjoyed it again this year. Please come back during dogwood season. And anything else that the folks should know about what you guys have going on coming up, or just make sure to tune in and don't miss any episodes.
Yeah, essentially that. Just don't miss the episodes. And I guess, we're going to plan on doing maybe some Instagram lives or some things if you want to ask questions, or, have a discourse about some of these episodes. I mean, it's a lot of.
Why don't you guys have a place like we do for the drive-through that people can email questions? They got to email you topics, subject. Chris Colt is who I'm going to go for a deep album cut. By season 5, you got to do Chris Colt.
Okay.
Oh, right.
Who else ever climbed out of a cage match and left the arena in the middle of the match because he saw LSD-induced giant spiders climbing the cage after him?
Whoa.
That's the pitch right there.
There you go.
Chris Colt has been on the list, but the only thing I would say is like isn't there like only a scarce amount of archival footage? I guess it doesn't really matter.
There's no tape and almost nobody left alive to tell the tale. But goddamn, what a story for that guy!
Wow. So good. Yeah, unbelievable.
Anyway, well, hey, you guys got Strangler Lewis and Henry DeGlane on national television for the first time a few years ago, so I don't see why you couldn't do that. Anyway.
It's true.
All right, I'll let you guys go. But again, it's Vice TV. It's Dark Side of the Ring. They're doing a marathon all day on May the 6th in anticipation of this. And we appreciate you guys coming on the program. We're going to watch them. And I guess I have no finish for this bit because we're going to be going back to our regular program. So I will just stop speaking. And thank you guys for being on the show.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Well, there you go, folks. For those of you who cannot get enough of my smiling face, I will be featured intermittently throughout the both sets of the season 3 of Dark Side of the Ring on Vice. And Brian, even though you're not on Vice, but you have plenty of Vice in your various programs, what crimes are you perpetrating this week?
Well, Vice can't afford me, but I'm free for everyone. All across the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, on Twitter, at Superpodcasts, or on Facebook, facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. A few notes. The latest episode of Charting the Territories with Al Getz and John Boucher out right now with a look at Tony Bourne's career. Also, Mario Galento exposing the business live on Memphis radio, the Ballad of Bull Ramos, Tiki Bars, and so much more, and a look at the second quarter of 1981 in Mid-South Wrestling. A unique way of looking at wrestling history, and if you love wrestling history, you need to geek out on this podcast. Charting the Territories, available at chartingthepodcast.com, or look for
I've had that cassette tape, by the way, of Mario Galento for like 30 years.
It's amazing. It's still amazing. So that would have been after the second incident where he went after Lawler, right?
Yes, with the switchblade in Jonesboro.
So the first one, just for the people who don't understand the story, Mario Galento, who had been a big star in Memphis, I mean, we just talked about a 59 program. He was there as Butch Boyette in 59. He attacked, or tried to attack, Jerry Jarrett live on TV when he was wrestling against Lawler.
Oh, he got to him.
But he was wrestling against Lawler, right?
Yeah, what happened was, at that time, Jarrett was obviously the booker in Memphis, and there was one part of the story that said that Mario Galento, at that point, he was an old-timer, he couldn't get booked, and he was trying to either shoot his own angle or just mad that he couldn't get booked, and then Jerry Jarrett later on said that there may have been something to the story that because Roy Welch was starting to suffer a little dementia at that point in time. And it's somebody that was trying to get at Jerry. Jarrett may have built Roy and or someone else up that Jerry was trying to steal the territory, and they wanted to shoot on Jerry on television, regardless of what the reasoning behind it was. Mario Galento, he was found with several $100 bills on him, so somebody paid him to do it. But anyway, he hopped in the ring in a studio match on Memphis TV live one day when Jarrett was wrestling Lawler and Sam Bass was Lawler's manager. So he was in the corner and went after Jerry Jarrett and went after because a lot of people may know from an angle they did later on in Memphis, he was blind in one eye. So he went for his good eye, and Lawler and Bass had to think quick and jump on him. And then Tojo hit the ring, and they turned it into a schmoz. Tojo's got his wooden shoe, and they got Galento out of there, some the worse for wear. And then it was it that night or was it soon after that?
It was another show. Wasn't it another show a few weeks later in Alabama or something?
No, Jonesboro, Arkansas.
Okay.
That Mario Galento apparently was fucking mad that Lawler, tried to help Jarrett. So he came to Jonesboro and was trying to hit the ring on Lawler with a switchblade. So at that point, that's when some of the newspapers picked up on Jackie Fargo had called Mario Galento, because I'm sure they had known each other for years, and said, Lawler's my boy. If you fuck with him, I'll kill you. Well, then they called the police. Mario Galento called the police on Fargo for making a death threat, and that made the newspapers that Jackie Fargo had threatened the life of Mario Galento, and it was quite exciting for a while. But he didn't fuck with Lawler anymore after Fargo threatened to kill him.
We'll hear more about that on Charting the Territories, once again at chartingthepodcast.com, or look for Charting the Territories wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Want to make mention of the latest Super Studcast for patrons of Ron Fuller's Studcast at patreon.com/Studcast. Ron is celebrating 200 episodes of the Studcast with an all-star extravaganza, many, many guests, including Mr. Jim Cornette and myself on these very special Super Studcast episodes. Anything you'd like to say, Jim?
Yes, we tell some great stories and have a wonderful time.
Hear more of that today. Lots and lots of special guests. Patreon.com/Studcast. Of course, the 605 Super Podcast, the Mothership. Go through the archives today at 605pod.com. New episode in production. Stay tuned for more information. The Mothership.
All right, I guess it's that point in time in the program where we have to talk about some current wrestling because there's nothing else left. The AEW program for April 28th is what we're going to discuss, but I am going to discuss this at the start of the program because, I've said this many times, Brian. I hate it when I'm right, but it happens so often I've come to get used to it. But it's not like that I cracked the atom, split the atom, or cured cancer, or sent a rocket to the moon. I simply evaluated what's happened in the past and said, well, since history usually repeats itself, this is the same thing is going to happen again concerning the ratings of this television program. And what I said, 3 shows ago, when they got the 1.2 million folks watching on Wednesday night, the first night they were unopposed when NXT moved, I said, well, they started out with 1.5 million. And then they dropped to a little over 1 million, and then they dropped under 1 million, and they were there for a while. And then what was it? They got 1 million before with something special. Then they dropped back, and then it was Mike Tyson. It was Shaq, and then Tyson, and then they're going to drop back because that's what's happened, and it's obvious. What their ceiling is, the first ever episode of the television program, you would think, got as many viewers as they were going to get for a while. That's normal with a highly anticipated debut, and then you drop, and then you settle in, and then you either start gaining or you lose. It's the same thing happening. They went back to 1.2 million because that was all the people that watched the show every week, plus some of the people that had been watching NXT, but they said, well, we'll give it a try. And some of the people just wanted to watch because Mike Tyson was on. They get these people, but then the next week they were down to 1.1. And then this week, they're back to, 889,000? It's because this is not rocket science, and it's not even knocking AEW. When you can advertise a major celebrity or a giant sports figure or a landmark hallmark program, then yeah, your viewership's going to be about as good as it's going to be. But it's also demonstrative of the fact that the general program, when those large numbers of people tune in, is not very good, and it doesn't make any sense. And most of the time you can't follow it from one week to the next, that those people dribble away because they don't get hooked. And that's the same thing that's happening again. And we said they're going to settle in at a little bit higher than they were with NXT as opposition, but not double what they were doing, because all those NXT people are not going to watch this fucking program. Is that what we're seeing here, or am I just misreading this information?
Well, again, to be fair, the night we're talking about, the Wednesday, what was the date of this past Wednesday's show?
April 28th.
April 28th. It was against a presidential address.
Okay, but do you think a lot of the numbnuts that would watch this cartoon, fucking Lollipop Guild wrestling show to begin with are going to be watching the president? I don't think their minds think that deep, but there's always something on television.
Well, their biggest...
As Tracy Smothers used to say, and there's all-night gas station open down the road. How you going to fight that?
Well, their biggest loss in terms of age group was people over the age of 50.
Biggest loss since when?
This week compared to the previous week, I assume.
The biggest loss from the previous week is because the biggest gain that they had the previous 2 weeks were people over 50 from the NXT audience. And I don't think the people over 50 are going to give these kids much more patience, or a lot much more of their time, because they have to be looking at it the same way I am. They get people to watch, but they can't hook them because the show's not any good and the personalities don't get over. So they can build to a landmark and do a landmark, and then they're going to settle back into the people that will accept second-rate amateur programming. But that's just my evaluation based on the facts and data.
So where do you think that sets them up for the next week, which is Blood and Guts, the War Games match on free TV? Do you think they'll get a bump from that? Do you think they'll be in line with this week?
Again, how many times can you drop the cow, though? Now, if they're hot-shotting, and one of the only reasons for one of their segments, the Parley, boy, that's a term that's on everybody's fucking tip of everybody's tongue. Even I had to look that one up. But that was just hot-shotted to tell the people that these two teams are going to be in the ring and probably get in a fight. And the only time that you would expect them to get in a fight on this show, they actually don't. So they're going to come back with free TV, War Games, Blood and Guts, boom, drop the cow, and maybe they'll get back up over 1 million. And then it's going to start dropping again until their next milestone show. And if you're not careful and the milestones come too quickly after each other in succession, then your peak viewership starts getting a little bit lower. And then when you dribble away the next 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, that starts getting a little lower. And so you want to come back with a bigger milestone. And it's the law of diminishing returns. When you're not hooking people to continue watching on a weekly basis and grow with the regular weekly program that you're doing, for good or bad or whatever it is, then that's when you've got an issue. When you have to count on either giving away pay-per-view matches or major celebrities and major matches, not just teasing them or promoting the pay-per-views, but actually giving the pay-per-view matches away with the major celebrities and etc., then you're establishing, okay, this is what our regular is going to be. And then you can't follow that because you don't have that many major celebrities. You certainly don't have that many big money matches. So we'll see what happens. But no, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to dribble back for the normal shows, and then they'll figure out something or tease something. And the exploding ring, how many 100,000 something buy rates on pay-per-view? How many people are going to buy the next exploding ring number 2 pay-per-view from these people after the fart in church that finished the first one? So they've lost that fucking opportunity. Anyway, that's how I see the ratings. Am I just biased, or does that make any sense?
Well, you're certainly a bit biased, but you also make some sense.
Okay, well, so we got both. Anyway, I noticed this week on the television program, Paul White, the former Big Show, No More BS, a shot of him is in the open. He's only they signed the Big Show, and I know he's doing announcing on YouTube. Does that mean he can't or shouldn't ever be on their television program? Has he been on the TV show? He was the first 2 weeks, right? They announced him and he came back the next week and made some other announcement. Have we seen him since on their network television program?
No, the only other appearance I remember was on the pay-per-view.
Anyway, so the first match on this program was Brian Cage versus Adam Page. They have 2 cages, 1 page. Hopefully they won't hire that Nick Gage, the bank-addicted drug robber. But that match might be okay, except it never really... As soon as Adam Page is coming out onto the ramp, here comes Brian Cage and Team Taz, and they attack Adam Page. And they're kicking the shit out of him on the ramp. And then the Dork Order comes out to save him. And every single member of the Dork Order is guys either wearing nondescript street clothes and or nondescript masks and or guys with Roman numerals sharpied on their chests like the Wade Boggs Challenge at Always Sunny. And it's 10, I counted 10 guys and 4 referees having a sloppy brawl. Even Cole Cabana doesn't even stand out anymore because he was just dressed in street clothes, even though he's a full-grown man in the middle of the schmoz. You couldn't find him. And they're having this sloppy brawl where everybody's not really trying to fight. They're just trying to make some motion. And the referees suddenly separate all the extra people and get them to go back into their tubes. And at that point, Brian Cage power bombs Adam Page flat of his back on the ramp, the wooden ramp, then throws him in the ring, and the referee starts the match because Adam Page says to. He goes over there, you want to go? And Page says, yes, it's just a flesh wound. What the fuck? And when the referee goes to the babyface and asks if he wants to fight or if he wants to continue, it's because he's in the middle of a fucking championship match or an opportunity to get even with a hated rival and he's bleeding or he's been injured and the referee's given him the option of quitting and he won't. Or if there's been an angle done and this is his championship match, but he's going into it with an injury, but he doesn't want to lose this one opportunity. But it's not guts, it's stupidity. If you get attacked by 5 people, powerbombed on a fucking wooden ramp, and thrown into the ring, why would you say, no, I'll fight on a goddamn TV match? Just a fucking TV. And why would the referee give you that option with you've already had 15 people in a fucking fight all around the ring, and now they've just all left, and you're going to start a fucking match from scratch? And I hate to say it, but the more I see of Cage, the more I see that he's exposed. He's a genetic freak, and obviously he's got the physique for it. He reminds me of Brackus in a way. Do you remember Brackus? That might pop you.
I remember. What was it? Achim Albrecht?
Achim Albrecht.
That's what it was.
A German bodybuilder who moved in a robotic fashion and was a wonderful person. And Cage beats the shit out of Adam Page and bounces him off the railings and gets all his shit in, body slams him on the floor. But he was going from move to move with robot face on, Cage was. And I don't know how that they fucking sold Adam Page on, okay, this guy is going to beat the fuck out of you before the match, beat the fuck out of you during the match, and then he's going to beat you. And I know they haven't given up on Adam Page. They're just smart enough to not realize that they've buried him. But Cage, again, hit him with everything he possibly could. He did that great suplex, vertical suplex over the top, the outside in. But it was just a 2 count and meant nothing. Page made a brief comeback on the floor. And then Page climbed to the top rope, and you know the moonsault he does off the top turnbuckle, right? To the floor on the guys in every match. It's usually a group of guys that can catch him. In this instance, obviously, he very well Cage can catch me, but he forgot about one thing. He makes a comeback on the floor on Cage, and then he just turns around and walks away from Cage and starts climbing up to the top. And if you go back and watch, Brian, he never looks behind him. And Cage, in the far shot, when Page is on the top rope, Cage is bent over the rail facing away from Adam Page, is nowhere in the vicinity. But then when Page leaps without looking, suddenly Cage is right underneath him to catch him in the perfect position. So you see blatantly that Adam Page knew that he was going to be there to catch him because he was supposed to be. So he just like an idiot walked away from the guy he was fighting, climbed up on top of something 10 feet high, and without even turning his head, fucking did a backflip on a motherfucker that where he was, he wouldn't have hit. The guy had to move to get there to catch him. But this stuff ain't fake. It was rotten. And then Cage foiled a buckshot lariat, hit a power bomb, a buckle bomb, dropped him on his head with some kind of sloppy finish, and beat Page 1, 2, 3. So they finally decided to start giving Team Taz some credibility, but I'm just saying right now, Adam Page is a great talent who has been rendered meaningless and is adrift aimlessly in their booking and in their world. And Brian Cage is another one of these genetic marvels who mentally will not be able to get out of his own way and keep himself from getting over. Your thoughts?
Sick of the Dark Order. It feels like they're in multiple segments on every show. I was disappointed with the match. It wasn't exactly what I would have wanted, but what I would have wanted was for the guys to be different wrestlers. Now that I think about it, Brian Cage, like you said, it's just a lot of it's spots, trading spots or doing spots. This isn't just about Brian Cage, but I'm getting sick of the spot. Red Velvet does it. Other people do it, where the wrestler turns towards the camera, away from their opponent, to look at the camera and then do a standing moonsault on the person behind them. Sometimes they hit it. Most times they miss it. But what's the point of that? Just looking at the camera, waiting.
Brian Cage doing a standing moonsault is a lot stupider than a 125-pound girl doing a standing moonsault, but he's still an idiot for doing a standing moonsault. Just because you can cut your own ear off doesn't mean you're Van Gogh. It looks stupid coming from him. He's a fucking giant fucking bodybuilder. Why is he just going to do a standing moonsault?
Why doesn't he just start breakdancing while he's at it? When you want to show off your skills. They have blown it with Adam Page. When you really think back, and I know you're not a big Omega fan, naturally, but when Omega and Page were teaming up, there was a bit of anticipation about when they finally are going to turn on each other, and then eventually they broke up. They had that one match. Omega won. It set up everything with Omega that's going on now. Since that point, there's cooling someone off, and then there's the person's not even on the register anymore. They have really ruined it with Adam Page. They'll try to do something to get it back, but when you wait a year and that whole year has been him running around with a jobber group of idiots, what's the point? What have you done?
Taking him to get ice cream on his lawnmower.
They're always running out. How many segments in the last 3 or 4 weeks have we seen where all of a sudden just there's 10 members of the Dark Order running out there to help someone or protect someone or save someone?
Suddenly the gates of Lilliput just open, and it's just flooded with these frantic, masked, numbered creatures wandering around. Anyway, they got a limousine. They rented a limousine for the Elite. Is it me? Is it the audio? Is it the fact that they're speaking words but not saying anything? Or do you never understand a goddamn word that these people say in relation to whatever point they're trying to make?
Well, no one speaks in layman's terms. No one speaks in just a common vernacular that's easy to understand. Everyone has even if they don't have a writer, they have some sort of memorized thing that they decided they wanted to say, and they try to deliver it, and it doesn't always work. Omega is very, very good at that. And
so
Matt Jackson right behind him.
His breathy voice just... But anyway, so they're in the limo, and basically Harpo is getting to the point where he's not afraid. They're not afraid of Moxley and Kingston, all that stuff. And then, of course, the horn honks outside the limousine and they all shit their pants in a comedic way. But come to find out, it's not Moxley and Kingston honking the horn like they're going to run into their empty bus like they did last week, but it's Michael knock it to fuck off in the driver's seat who punched the wrong button. So they can't even be serious in their own fucking pre-tapes that they write themselves. But anyway, apparently later tonight they were teasing the idea we'd see Eddie Kingston against Knock It to Fuck Off. I mean, and there's Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson now doing Three Stooge shit and making faces. It's not possible. Whatever happens to anybody that gets involved with this group of jackoffs, it's not possible for them to be serious at that point on forevermore. It's just it's a big goof. It's a big hoot for them. And then we go right from that, speaking of a big hoot, into this. I knew what this was going to be, and I hate Mike and Matt Sydal. I like Mike Sydal. He's a nice young man. He worked underneath in Ring of Honor while I was there, and Matt, his older brother, is a very good worker when it comes to doing the moves, and he's wonderfully in shape. But all this was going to be was to the nth degree cheerleading gymnastics with these four guys, and that's what we got. And for the people who say that the Cucamonga kids, they're better as heels now, I'm looking at them making the faces and doing the heel actions, and I can't see the heels as heels because they look so preposterously like children playing wrestler. They do it well, but it's like me imitating a Terry Funk promo. If I'm doing a Terry Funk promo, people would laugh because it would be Jim Cornette doing a Terry Funk promo. I would be playing a part just because I recited all the words and approximated the voice. Visually, it would not work. And this was 100 miles an hour, nothing registered. Now, except Pie Face is doing a little strut and making constipation faces like Twinkle Toes does. They went through a break at one point. Did you see the Bucks did a switch in front of the corpse referee and he let them do it, and even the announcers were calling bullshit on it? Well, he's letting them get away with that. This moron, Rick Knox, is the worst referee I've ever seen. Imagine the 75-year-old New York State Athletic Commission referees that I had to work with in the 80s that were on the verge of not just death, but fossilization. And they were better than this idiot. He's got no credibility, and even their fans and their announcers can see it. He's got a job because he's the Rancho Cucamonga branch of the Young Bucks fan club. And so a more 100-mile-an-hour shit with the ludicrous choreography. And also, just from a booking standpoint, even if you did want to take the Young Bucks seriously as a fucking tag team, I don't know why you would, but if you did, then the Sydal brothers, who are even smaller than they are, and have never won a match on television, and have barely had a match on television, were kicking the shit out of all the supposed greatest tag team in the world. But if this was the 1990s WWF, the Sydals, all respect to them, would be the conquistadors. And it went on forever. And after everybody survived every move that's ever been done in a ring, they beat Mike with a shitty-looking double knee lift. Couldn't even take a bump. He was already on his knees. This was rotten. Hello?
Yeah, I didn't know if that was the end of your comments about this match.
Well, I'm just, help me in any way. Help me understand this. Help me get over this. Help me make it through the night.
It was exactly what you would expect it to be when you hear Young Bucks versus the Sydal brothers, or more specifically, Matt Sydal. I like the Bucks better as heels. At least now it makes a little more sense why they behave the way and act the way they do. Nick Jackson, it does seem to have made a little bit of an improvement. Matt Jackson, like you said, it's the same hokey faces and bad acting. Nick Jackson doesn't do that, so it works. Matt Jackson, it's just bad emoting. Rick Knox is the worst referee there. We've all talked about it. I will tell you real quick, I just heard the other day from a friend of ours, Scott Dickinson, longtime referee, longtime WCW referee.
Yeah.
He wrote to me, he said, every time I hear you talk about AEW, I think about the time I moved to California and our favorite dentist hooked me up with Jesse Hernandez. I did 2 shows for him and asked about more, and he said, quote, well, we have Rick Knox. Scott didn't get any more bookings.
But you like him better as heel.
You don't think this makes more sense? Them dressing like that, acting like that, being straight up heels?
It makes more sense because they are such smarmy, obnoxious pricks that you naturally want to dislike them. But I think you're still dabbling in the devil's lettuce.
Well, hold on. I actually wasn't this week. But let's just say you had to book the Young Bucks. Couldn't fire them. For some reason, you're in this weird predicament where you just have to book certain people. You have to book the Young Bucks. They're on the roster. You have them there. You have the choice to make them babyface or heel, to use them the way they've been used in the past or the way they're being used right now. You would admit this is more effective, them as heels like this.
I'd say a nice little babyface team with some bandanas on to put every other heel team over. That'd be the best use of them and their slappable faces. But speaking of tag teams that don't have slappable faces, Frankie Kazarian and Chris Daniels come out. Guess what they said, Brian? Do you remember what they said? They're still saying, next time we lose, we're done as a team. Which they last referred to on television the last time we saw them in a match, what, about 4 months ago?
It was either like December or January. It's been a while, yeah.
But now they're the number 1 contenders. Apparently they haven't lost a match. So, kudos to them for that. But then what was the point of bringing it up 4 months ago and never referring to it again? But now they're saying, next time we lose, we're done as a team, but they're the number 1 contenders, and they want a tag team title match. But now they're saying the next time they lose, they're not going to be a team again. So I don't know if I would put a lot of faith in them and give them a tag team title match on a theory that I may then not have a tag team. This does not make any sense whatsoever.
Was it ever explained why Scorpio Sky left SCU?
No, he was sitting in the bleachers with that fucking idiot Ethan Page. That's all we know. They must have concocted something amongst themselves. Chris Daniels' promo picked this up a little bit, but Frankie was just saying shit that either they told him to say or he memorized to say. And there's Knock It the Fuck Off being a comedy stooge in a fucking funny outfit. Jane Cargill is still saying that all the managers want her. But yet, none of the managers have actually come out and said that. Have you noticed that?
Well, Matt Hardy and Vicky Guerrero expressed some interest last week in a video package.
Oh, I forgot in the pre-tape. I forgot because they can't let Jane out there live. They don't want to press their luck. But isn't the way that this is supposed to be? And by the way, considering every manager in this company is completely useless and never does anything, and generally when a guy gets a manager, they start losing more than when they didn't have one. The managers come out and watch the talent wrestle and are in the vicinity of the talent surveying all the attention is on the talent, but they can't put Jane out there live except in carefully choreographed matches and no promos, because then we'll all be happy. So they're having to do this basically by videotape and or Jane just saying, yeah, all the managers are after me.
Plus, they just did that. Who did they do that for? Was it FTR? Several months back? I mean, almost close to a year back.
No, wasn't it Archer? It was Archer, wasn't it? Or was it? I can't remember, because these
Because I remember Tully sitting in the
Tully.
crowd. That's why I thought it was FTR.
Oh, who does the highest paid talent in the company is usually sitting in the crowd.
But she keeps saying all these managers, 2 weeks in a row, the only managers they either show talking or show in action are Matt Hardy and Vicky Guerrero. All the managers, those two.
I bet you Arn doesn't, though. Is Arn still around? We've seen Arn the past couple of weeks. I can't keep track of these people. Anyway, I know this won't come as much of a surprise to you, but the next match was Penthouse and now Alex, the translator, is back with Penthouse. And he's probably the best manager because he's one that I haven't seen, and he's actually getting some heat. But they matched Penthouse up with Pockets with Trent. So Penthouse is a heel again this week. He's been back and forth the past few weeks. Alex is back. Alex did a good promo on the inset, but basically if they're going to put shit like this on national TV, I will pass. 15 minutes they devoted to this. And guess who won? Not Penthouse. Not the guy that's in one of usually a top position with the Lucha Brothers or the Death Triangle, the guy that's got the new foreign language translator, the heel translator, the guy that jumped and had a pull apart with Cody a few weeks ago. No, Pockets wins. All this time that they have spent trying to get Penthouse over, featuring Penthouse over the last several weeks, and the biggest joke in the company just beat him on television with no fucking falderall about it. So is that thanks for coming, Penthouse? What?
It's
the
never
fuck was that?
It's never thanks for coming anybody. I'm not exactly sure because they really have something with Penta. Now you got me calling him Penthouse. With Penta El Zero Miedo and Alex Abrahantes, I believe is how you pronounce it. There's something there, although part of me thinks he's getting way too comfortable and they're doing too much with him at ringside. Then another part of me thinks that's the gimmick. This guy was on the Spanish announce team, started translating. It went to his head, and now he's out there doing poses with Penta. They have something. There's something really good there. He's good on the mic, and it's especially good because he exudes a heel charisma.
Yes.
In this role of being the translator. There's nothing that would make you cheer him or pop for him. He's really good in that role, but they had him lose.
Only they should not at this point have him doing physical shit because that's when the buzz killer comes because he's not experienced and it doesn't look right.
Well, actually, that's the funny part. I think he is. I read something. I'm trying to see if I still left it open. I had it here the other day. I read an article about him that like he trained to be a wrestler 20-something years ago. And he was like working in Calgary or something for one of those versions of Stampede that went out of business. And then he just did various things in wrestling with, I think, like Impact or TNA and various things. He worked on the Spanish announce team and different things. So he actually has been around for a while and has some training.
Well, it didn't look sharp the other week, but maybe he's rusty. But anyway, the point is, it doesn't matter now because now the people know that Alex doesn't make a shit because he's with a fucking flunky because he just got beat by a fucking comedy guy. So who gives a shit? Did you know what the word parley meant before this?
Parlay.
No, parley. Parley. Somebody's been reading the dictionary over there. I had to. Hold on here. I will find the spot. Find the page. Wait. It's not parsec. It's not parsimony. Parley, not parlay. Parley, Parley. A discussion or conference, especially between opponents, is what a parley is. A parlay is a bet comprising the sum of a prior wager plus its winnings or a series of bets made in such a manner. Point is,
that's why I was confused.
the often used trope in wrestling of a parlay. What the fuck? They had to figure out a way to hotshot advertising that these two teams for the Blood and Guts, the Pinnacle and the Dinner Circle, were going to be in the ring together for ratings and people thinking they're going to get in a fight. Do you remember all the times that JJ and Dusty sat down and on the Horsemen and the Dusty's team sat down in the middle of the ring to discuss the rules and the terms of their War Games match?
No,
of course you don't.
The only time anyone would sit down together would be in the offices of the promotion, where you usually have the promoter or the figurehead at the head of the table and other officials in the room to kind of guarantee there would be no unprofessional activity.
Yes. But in this case, because they needed a rating, which they didn't get, they just, well, we're just all going to be there. Here's this angle between these two teams started with a vicious, violent, criminal assault and beating, which led to hospitalization, and 4 weeks later ended up with nasty words being exchanged. So the Dinner Circle ride in on motorcycles, because that always makes you look like a bad guy, a badass. Of course, there's 5 of them, and from the tube to the stage is 15 feet, so they just basically buddened out 10 feet on motorcycles, and then they got pyro, and then they had to wait forever for 2 choruses from the paid singing fans of Judas, and then Tony Schiavone gives the rules with the teams. It's the same rules as it's always been. None were changed. And then they went to toss the coin, and Spears stopped it and did a promo that I didn't actually get. And their intention here was to have everybody speak to their counterpart in the other team, except thankfully for Wardlow and Hager, who don't need to speak at all. But Spears being the first one kind of didn't kick this thing off with a lot of oomph, but he's knocking Sammy Guevara, and Sammy Guevara then turns around and gives the Pinnacle the advantage in the Blood and Guts and the War Games, so they're going to get the 2-on-1, the 3-on-2, etc., the man advantage at the staggered entrances, which works if it's Sammy saying, I'll fight all of y'all, but he just basically stepped up and gave an advantage away for his entire team, and nobody seemed upset about it. And then Cash and Dax promoted Santana and Ortiz, but they were taking turns reciting lines to each other's counterparts. And this is stupid if they hate each other so much to just talk in turn to one another. This seemed like the start of a fucking angle between two sides instead of the end of it. And the fucking violent assault that hospitalized and turned all Jericho and his whole group babyface was a hell of a way to start if this is their go-home show for the fucking match. And MJF and Jericho were very good. But it was guys doing material about a hot-shotted match that's being given away on free TV 6 months too early in just because they want to pop a fucking rating. But like I said, it started with a hospitalization and ended up talking mean to each other. And by the way, Chris, get with your rock and roll history. 1967 was the summer of love, not 1960. 1969 was Altamont and the end of the Flower Children.
Well, Woodstock, too.
Well, in Woodstock, but 67 was the summer of love.
That's right.
What about the parlay, pal? What'd you think of their parlaying?
Not for me. I mean, I just can't get over the fact that they're doing all this and they did the beat down at Pinnacle. To me, the feud has never recovered. There's no more urgency to see Chris Jericho get his hands on MJF, to see MJF get his comeuppance, to see any of these guys get their beating. They've all gotten their beating. It's over. So
they got it as soon as the baby faces came back and flushed MJF's head in the toilet. That's what I've said. They started out, they hospitalized the heels and switched them babyface. And then 2 weeks later, the baby faces come back and just kick the shit out of the heels, take all the heat off of them.
And now they just trade insults. Then they
announce a match, and now they just trade insults.
Now they just do comedy. Now they just trade insults and see who can get the biggest pop for the line that is closest to reality, really, is what when they're pointing out, Jericho's comedy bullshit, that's truth. It's just you can't believe they're saying it on the air. This isn't good. They've wasted MJF the same way they've wasted Adam Page for almost the exact same period of time, actually. I'm interested. I'm curious to see the match, to see how it'll go, to see how it'll be messed up. Will there be lots of blood on TV? 2 rings in Daly's place? I mean, it'll be an interesting spectacle, but this whole feud has been booked ass backwards and wrong. And in terms of Parley, that word and the use of it here and this whole thing smells of Chris Jericho more than anything. Let's do a dinner debonair. Let's do a parley. Every interview he does. A
debonair, a parley without care.
Everything with Chris Jericho has a stupid name, something he thought of, I'm going to assume, in a vodka-fueled stupor, but not good. They've wasted MJF. Wardlow doesn't look anywhere near as intimidating, dressed like the DJ from D-Light. FTR have not done anything in months. Sean Spears, who gives a shit? I'm going to guess he's going to be the guy on the team that loses if anyone on that team loses. If that's the other thing. Based on everything they've done, if the heels now lose the match, then truly what was the point of any of this? So that tells you the heels have to win. I don't know.
The heels ain't going to win. I guarantee
I don't want this. Like Omega and Moxley, I thought that was over. When the exploding match happened, I said, well, this bomb didn't go off, but at least this bomb of a feud is over. And then it just keeps going. And I think these...
Well, that's what I want to bring this up, because I want you to try to explain the next segment to me. They alternate back and forth between acting like that they are legitimately mad at each other, with Eddie Kingston being such a great convincing promo and Moxley being such a violent badass. They want to convince people that they're badasses and they're violent and they're really mad, and in the same segments, they willingly go along with stupid comedy shit that knock it the fuck off. Sitting in the ring in his chair with his headset on and his laptop, and Kingston comes out and cuts the promo where I don't want any of this sports entertainment crap. I'm not fighting this guy. I want fucking Harpo. Harpo comes out, won't fight Kingston, and then Michael Nakazawa. This is another thing. There are legitimate pro wrestlers that could use a job in this day and age, in this current environment. But just because this guy is another one of Twinkle Toes' fetishes, he's employed by a major company to stand around and be a goof. He hits Kingston from behind with the most horrible-looking laptop shot ever in history, because remember, he's not a real wrestler. He's one of the phony fucking fake play indie outlaw wrestlers from Japan that Twinkle Toes has hired and brought along with him across international lines. Maybe there's some law. But then he can't do anything to Kingston, and Kingston suplexes him and knocks him out. And then he gets a chair and he goes to Pillmanize Nakazawa's ankle. Of course, he put the chair on the wrong way, but it didn't matter because they weren't going to have to stomp it anyway. But I would like to have seen him stomp the chair that way. We wouldn't have to look at Nakazawa too much longer. Harpo, of course, playing a heel is going to let him do it, but in such a way that he's not serious. It's all for comedy. Then Harpo calls Cutlet out, Brandon Cutlet, so that he can do something, but he falls out of the tube in front of Moxley, who's beating him up in the tube. And then Moxley comes out and puts Twinkle Toes in the fucking sleeper and threatens Callis and now we know also, by the way, Nakazawa still was laying there with the ankle in the chair. So apparently if you put a chair on somebody's ankle, it automatically paralyzes them. So Callis makes a tag of Kingston and Moxley against Harpo and Knock It the Fuck Off for next week. And boy, this was phony, ridiculous, horribly performed by everybody involved. It looked like it was laid out by an amateur. Nobody was serious besides Kingston. It wasn't laid out. It was really thrown up like a dog's dinner. I don't know what else to say. Did you even understand this? Well, I mean, it was simple to understand, but why would anybody do this way? And you're making fun of acting serious at the same time as you're doing it. So what response are we supposed to have?
I don't know. Cutler and
this is a funny drama. It's
Cutler
a funny
and
drama.
Nakazawa are ridiculous. I'm not exactly sure why they would do this. I'm not sure why any of this is happening. This is a feud we did not need to continue. Moxley versus
These
Omega.
guys have to be going back to the hotel afterwards and going, he's paying for all this. He's paying us to do this shit on his television.
No, they're believers. They're all believers.
Anyway, so there was Tony Schiavone in the back with Taz, who was crowing about Brian Cage beating Adam Page, but then here comes Christian Cage. And Cage, he did a good promo on Taz. And he wrote it himself, but he's got experience with actually doing big-time television, and he's a well-spoken, eloquent guy. And if everybody could write their own material and deliver it like Christian Cage, they might be okay with letting guys do what they want. This was a decent promo here that sounded like an adult speaking in a halfway serious manner. And even if the business is a work, he wasn't laughing about it while he was doing it. So maybe more of that. The next segment with the Virgin Penelope Ford with Pip Sabian took on the returning Chris Flatlander with Pockets in her corner. And okay, I was saying there might be comedic value in this, but time is short. So I knew that you would let me know what botches I missed. What botches did I miss?
There were just a few botches during the match, and then Chris Statlander won.
Chris Flatlander.
Yeah, that one's not working. Chris Statlander.
I thought she was very dangerous, but nevertheless, I will bow to your instincts. Explain this to me now. 10 of the Dark Order, 10, not 5, but 10, he's twice as good, is in the TV main event against the TNT television champion, Darby Allin, with Sting in his corner. So Darby's a babyface, Sting's a babyface. The Dork Order now have become laughable, comedic, underneath babyfaces, I guess. But 10 cuts a promo that pulls at your heartstrings that he wants to win the championship for Brody Lee. Are they completely insane? You have a job guy out there cutting a babyface promo saying he wants to win for a guy that's really just passed away, and he's in a match against one of their top babyfaces with an icon of a babyface in that guy's corner. And now you're putting the people in a position, well, do we cheer for Sting and Darby Allin, or do we cheer for this masked goof to win on behalf of poor Brody Lee? What the fuck are they doing? That's insane. Why put Darby Allin or Sting in that position? It was like when fucking Horner made Bullet Bob Armstrong take the Smoky Mountain belt away from him, but Bob didn't know that he was going to have the crippled kid holding the belt in his arms. Did you notice that, or were you zoned out by that point?
I mean, yeah, I noticed it. It was weird making this all about Brody Lee after everyone has already mourned the death of Brody Lee. I will say the last few weeks, and they pointed out on commentary, that I think, is this the 5th week in a row or something like that Darby's had a defense on TV? I care about it less and less each week. Darby was a lot more effective.
It's more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more and more of a nobody each week. Yeah, I agree. You were going to say he's more effective when you see him sparingly, but against top talent, against a heel that you could cheer for him, against. But let's win this one for our fallen comrade against the most expensive babyface icon we have in his protege. And then the Nightmare Express bus pulled up. Apparently they got a good paint job from deal on a paint job on the Lex Express. But now QT Marshall, Aaron Solo, Nick Comoroto, and Anthony Ogogo, fuck, they need to work on those names. They've stolen Cody's bus, and they pull up in the Nightmare Express bus for a 6-man tag, or as they call it on their television program, a trios match.
Why does Cody have a bus?
I didn't know he did until then. That's the first time I've seen the Nightmare Express bus. I thought the Elite had everybody gets, you get a bus, and you get a bus, and you get a bus. But this
he's not on the he's not on the road. There's Atlanta where he lives and Jacksonville where they tape this.
That's a good 4 or 5 hours apart. You need a bus to travel distances that great. But QT, of course, turned on the Nightmare family, Dustin and the Guns and old Shoddy Lee, and he took the students that they had never bothered to get over before until they exposed them as turning their backs on Cody. Otherwise, they were just nameless, faceless people. And now they're going to have a 6-man tag, Dustin, Billy Gunn, and Lee Johnson against QT and his guys, and a go-go on the floor, and immediately jumpstart. They went to a 6-way on the floor, and I defy anybody. I double dog dare you, go back and watch the video of this match. Immediately, Lee Johnson threw, I counted them, 18 completely fake punches to QT Marshall that barely touched him, that oftentimes touched his upper bicep, that many times missed him completely, obviously on camera, and QT, in selling those fake punches, never even went to a knee. He just stood there and got punched 18 times and then cut him off and run him into the rail. Comoroto looks like Hercules Hernandez without the talent. This match glowed green. It was chlorophyll green. QT Marshall's team, all of them have tremendous potential, and they badly need something like an Ohio Valley Wrestling television show for a year or so before they're on TNT. And that would have done a world of service to all these young men, but right now, this is brutal. I'm not saying this is a train wreck like the finest AEW segments aspire to be. It was just, this is rottenly booked indie wrestling with inexperienced and or lackluster talent. And finally, a go-go gut shot at everybody, and the heels won. And then there was an afterbirth. Explain this to me, Brian. The heels won with a go-go gut shotting people behind the referee's back. And then suddenly, all of QT's partners and friends and hangers-on, they left, but he stayed out there, and then Billy Gunn's kids jumped in the ring and beat QT up.
That's right.
And then all of QT's guys came back and got in a fucking fight, and QT ran off.
No, he didn't run off. He kind of stumbled off.
He stumbled off and stumbled and fumbled and fell off and got to the bus, and there was Cody on the bus, and they fought around the fucking bus. And I wrote, who's laying this shit out? They go to the top of the bus. Cody puts a figure 4 leg lock on QT on top of the bus and then lets it go. And then stands up and puts his hands in the air, and they go to a graphic because this is a taped show. And within 10 seconds, they have announced that Tony Khan has made the match for next week, and they've got a graphic. What the fuck? He didn't even have time to say the words, next week, Cody can wrestle, and that would... On top of the bus. This was such a mess. And these guys, and they're not teaching these green guys anything about positioning and timing and where to be, because everything is laid out like it's a fucking acid trip. And then the announcers made sure to mention that on May 12th, on the TV program, Moxley will defend not their championship, but the IWGP United States title against Yuji Nagata. And the announcers had to act like anybody but the fucking base AEW audience, and nobody else in the United States of America would have a fucking idea who Yuji Nagata is. And why would this be a thing that would get ratings past their base? Do you think everybody in that 880-something thousand people that watched last week, do you think even all of those people would have a fucking clue who Yuji Nagata is?
No, I don't think he's a commonly known name amongst American wrestling fans who aren't into Japanese wrestling.
And isn't he's got to be in his 50s. Has he not been around for 25 years?
Well, he was wrestling in WCW in the late 90s, so he has to be in his 50s.
So what? All right. Well, but before we even talk about who Yuji Nagata is or isn't, I didn't even ask you about, what did you think about Cody coming out of his own bus after it was stolen?
It was so ridiculous. First of all, you saw him in the window as QT was walking up. QT had to pretend like he couldn't see and he was looking down. You clearly see Cody calmly standing there like he's waiting to get off at his bus stop before that door opens. Shivani had to say something. It was so obvious that he was there. So then they start fighting, and of course, no figure four hurts as bad as the one on the roof of a bus. But again, the booking of Cody. Cody and QT, partners and friends. QT turns on Cody, breaks their school apart. He now has his own troupe. Cody's been gone the last several weeks because, every few months Cody needs another several weeks off. Cody now returns, and they're immediately going to the match. Next week on the show, they're immediately going to the match. Again, they have a pay-per-view coming up. There's no way you can't tell me it wouldn't have been better. They do. I think at the end of May, they have a pay-per-view. You can't tell me if you have Cody now and you have a month to build into him against QT, you couldn't have done something for a few weeks on TV to build up that match. Promos, an appearance, a match, something. Instead of Cody magically, hey, where's the bus? The bus is gone. Can we find out where it is? It's in Jacksonville. Where can it be in Jacksonville? I'll just go there. I have a key. And then he gets on the bus and he waits for him and he beats him up. This whole thing is so stupid. This whole thing is so stupid. And you know what? When you think of the executive vice presidents, you're not a fan of the Young Buck style of matches. Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
You understand that there are fans that are. You agree.
For whatever reason.
Those fans who like the Young Buck style of match have been super served. They may have received, in the last year and a half or so, the greatest the greatest Young Buck matches of all time.
The Young Bungs. There's the name, the Young Bungs.
But you agree that the fans of the Young Bucks may have received the best Young Buck matches ever.
I will say that for all the fans of Olympic gymnastics and the uneven parallel bars and all that stuff that the cheerleaders do, that is the majority of the programming in this promotion.
Right. So the Young Bucks are doing everything they can to take what they were and turn it up a little bit. Would you say you could say a similar thing about Omega? You're not a fan of Omega and his style. There are people that are. And he's being Omega. He's being the best version of himself, of that he could be. He's super serving the Omega fans.
Yes. Sadly, I would agree with you that is the best version of him that he can be.
Chris Jericho, not an executive vice president, but has a lot of the voice, I guess, of an executive vice president. He gets a lot of his stuff on the air. Not my style of wrestling. I don't think it's your style of wrestling. But you would agree that it appears, although incredibly misguided, that Chris Jericho is constantly churning out ideas and trying to come up with things to do on TV. Although, again, misguided, awful, garbage, bad, drunken, whatever you want to say about these ideas, he's delivering ideas and he's getting on TV doing them.
They exist, and he has them.
So all of these guys, I'm not a fan of most of what we've just talked about, but if you are, you're getting exactly what you want, maybe more than you expected.
The one guy through this whole thing has actually, on the big shows, has delivered with great pro wrestling matches, even sometimes with overbooked finishes, but great pro wrestling matches and big moments on pay-per-view and in the ring, him and Dustin, whatever. He's hardly there. He's barely there.
He's never there, and when he is there, they rush through something. Brody Lee beats Cody and destroys the Nightmare family with the Dark Order. Cody's off TV. Brody has, especially now, a somewhat memorable run as TNT champion. Cody returns, instantly wins back the belt. That's it. Cody, remember, Sting debuted by interrupting Cody's interview. Remember, Cody, when Jade Cargill debuted, interrupted a Cody interview. And then, do you remember the afterbirth for that Cody interview?
Oh, good Lord. They went into some other piece of business involving other people, and Cody was just left standing there with his dick in his hand, wasn't it?
Wasn't it Cody got attacked by Team Taz? And then Darby Allin had to come out of the stands to save Cody. And then Cody was ready for his next thing, which was QT. Happens. Cody's off TV for weeks. He returns.
Well, wait a minute. When did Cody have the pull apart with Penta, old Penthouse?
That was like a 2-week thing.
Match.
That was a 2-week thing. That was the angle and then the match. I'll tell you, out of all the executive vice presidents, in terms of what's on the actual wrestling show, based on what you were before AEW and what you're delivering now, he's delivering the least. Because even the big shows, the Dustin match was a few years ago by this point now. The Jericho match early on was the first pay-per-view after TV started. The MJF program, I think they blew it. You know, it started out, it had a little bit of, where could this go? And then they killed it. Cody's done nothing. The Lance Archer program that started and ended.
And he's the one that we might actually be the most complimentary of if we got to see some good stuff from him, but he's the one we never see. We have to see these children force-fed down our gullets on every program.
It's like, you remember, like, Mid-South Wrestling started having a problem, and especially in, like, 85, where you'd see DiBiase and Dr. Death, and then they were gone because they were in Japan. Yeah. So when Watts had to start dealing, when all the promoters had to start dealing, well, other than Vince, with the Japanese commitments where some of your top guys would leave for several weeks and then come back and then happen again, you can only do so many injury angles. That's what it's like with Cody. Cody's there, he's gone, he's there, he's gone. He's never just there.
Well, let's talk about somebody that's just there. Explain the next thing to me. Pip Sabian and Bluto were in the back of the building somewhere, and Bluto in the locker room just snatched him, beat the shit out of him, threw him against the walls, slammed his arm in a door trying to break it, and then hugged him. And that's all we saw. When did they split up? Why did he beat him up? Why is he then hugging him after he beat little Pip up? What the fuck is going on here?
Not exactly sure. Obviously, Bluto is a deranged madman, which is why he beat him up and then hugged him. I believe there was a promo from Miro the week after the arcade romper room match or whatever it was, where he was disappointed with Kip. And somehow that led to this, where Kip goes in there with a flower or whatever the fuck he was doing, and Miro just kicks the shit out of him.
Grabbed him and kicked the shit out of him. All right, the main event, we teased it a little earlier for the TV title, Darby Allin with Sting against 10 with the entire Dork Order, and he's going to win this for Brody Lee. And not only is this the main event on a national television program, but also the lunacy of putting Sting and Darby Allin in that position. And I said, you know what, I can't take anymore. And I skipped to the finish to see how ridiculous it was. If they wanted anybody to watch this, they'd take the mask off this goof and book him as a person and wash his chest off, the Sharpie off his chest, because it looked like a training match. One guy in jeans wrestling another guy in jeans and a cheap K&H mask. And
you know, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you noticed this, because you, looking through my notes here, you kind of skipped through the Penta Orange Cassidy match.
Yo, yes.
Did Orange Cassidy used to wear jeans in the ring? Were they always like stretch pants that look like jeans?
No, I thought they were jeans.
This week they were stretch pants.
That look like jeans.
They look like jeans. Yes.
Well, because it is difficult to wrestle in jeans. Not that he does any wrestling, but it is difficult because of your mobility. So maybe, there you go. But I mean, Darby Allin's kind of look like women's dancer pants. I don't know, but it looks like two guys in fucking street clothes and one guy in a cheap mask. And if finally Darby Allin dove out on everybody, and Sting comes over and protects Darby Allin from the Dork Order when they're all baby faces trying to win the match for their beloved dear leader who passed away. So there's no reason for Sting to protect anybody from anything. They're all just standing there, and that idiot Ethan Page comes out, posts Darby Allin behind everybody's back, and leaves, and nobody saw it. And 10 still couldn't beat Darby Allin, and Darby Allin ended up rolling 10 up. 1, 2, 3. Good Lord, holy mackerel. And then they shake hands. Darby Allin and 10 shake hands, but then Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page, Afterbirth, jump and attack and get heat on Sting and Darby Allin. And there was Page was in a pink polo shirt, slip-on shoes, and no socks, and a pair of shorts. He looked like a fucking assistant clerk at a golf store. And so now they're beating up Sting and Darby Allin, and suddenly here comes Lance Archer and his hated heel manager Jake Roberts to save the baby faces. And that's what they do. And everybody on this entire roster is a master of looking like some average nerd on the street. And so baby faces wrestled baby faces, then heels attacked baby faces, and then heels saved the baby faces from the other heels. And that was the end of the program. And that was why there was 880-something thousand people down from 1.1 million. Because that was a main event for the ages. Actually, for the aged. People who are so old they can't get up and change the channel.
You know, I'm a little more forgiving of AEW than you. And I've found the last few weeks, by the time you get to the end of hour 2, it's a bit of a drag. And I'm not saying get the title off Darby, but I don't know how many more of these just defenses against anybody I want to see on TV. Like, have it mean something or do something else, or I just didn't care at all about this match. And I knew it as soon as it started. Considering who was involved, I said, there's going to be a run-in. Sting's there. Somehow Jake and Lance Archer will get involved. Based on what we just saw on TV on Sting's side, probably.
Well, and also this shows...
And we saw the Dark Order, 3 times on this show?
Well, yes, of course we did. Because he has shot himself in the foot, and I'm talking about our amateur booker, Tony Khan, has shot himself in the foot for all that everybody was they have so much talent, they can't put it all on television. That's why, they have too many guys, but very little talent. They signed up a bunch of nondescript, small, inexperienced, green, and generally indie and outlaw comedy wrestlers, mixed in with some veterans and some guys who can go, but the dreck gets in the way, and because they've featured all those people, there's 100 million guys on the card that can be booked in a match, and nobody means anything. And now they're suffering from that because there's got 1 million guys like 10, and he ain't worth one. Nobody is they have tons of people that they're paying, and they have a very small roster of talent. And then they don't even know how to feature the ones that might have a chance to get over because they can't differentiate them from the schlubs they've signed. And usually the schlubs are the friends of the EVPs, so they get more time than the talented guys that accidentally got caught up in the net. So until somebody with a plan and some vision and some knowledge, and imagine this is never going to happen, by the way, goes in and tells Tony Khan, I'll straighten this out for you and I'll run it for you and I'll turn it into something for you, and fires half the roster and jerks a knot in the tail of the other half and changes the style completely, well, then you know what you'd have? You'd have nobody watching the show because the AEW fans would be pissed, and you'd have nobody watching the show because nobody else wants to watch this fucking show to begin with, no matter what you do to it. So you'd probably have nobody watching the show. And I wish I was one of those nobodies not watching this fucking show. but it's personal at this point. It's a grudge. I'm gonna wait till I get it right. We've been lied to and misrepresented. Talked about our sports-based wrestling, our alternative presentation, so I'm gonna stick with it till they get it right. Anyway, so that was that show, and this is our show, I guess. Is it not? Until we meet you again?
That was the end of that show. This is the end of this show.
And we will have another show next time in the normal schedule of things. The drive-thru will be out next Tuesday, and the experience will be out next Saturday, and the figures will be out every day at the post office. Closing thoughts, Brian?
I close with no thoughts.
Very good. And I will close with these thoughts. To everyone who listened today, thank you. Fuck you. Bye-bye, everybody.